OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Right, it's 7:30. It's Tuesday morning. You're very welcome along. If you want to get involved, we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Or, of course, you can always leave a comment on the YouTube stream. We're live on YouTube. We're live on OTB Sports Radio. You can get that on your smart speaker. You can get it on our app. It's the easiest way. You can plug it in through the car. I see a lot of people doing that these days. Shane, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, Ger. How are things?
Very good. Jason Sherlock's in the papers. Could have been your manager, isn't your manager.
It leaves a bittersweet taste when these commercial gigs come up and eventually they have to speak. I'm sure they don't want to speak whatsoever, and Jason's no different. But it doesn't hint.
We read this differently. You were like, he didn't want to get involved in management. Was your?
That's the way I read it yesterday. But certainly the quotes today in the papers are wider.
No, he just didn't want. It wasn't us. It was him. The way I read it is, it wasn't him. It was you.
That's
what I'm reading.
It's not me. It's you. Yeah. It's a strange one. It certainly hints at some problems in the process up in Monaghan. I don't know what's going on. You have to. It's not exactly groundbreaking to say there's a problem in the process when it's the September 13th
They're
and
fast.
they still don't have
You'll
a
say
manager.
that they're taking their time.
Well, I know it's the same in Donegal and Roscommon, but it's not quite.
What's going on?
It's not quite as embarrassing as in Monaghan, because Monaghan have had the very public rejections. Like Ger Brennan was nailed on as well, and that clearly fell through. I mean, you're hearing names within the county mentioned. I know I've heard Niall Moynihan's name mentioned in recent days.
Right.
I don't know. It's one of these things.
As the manager.
As the manager, potentially.
Like Oisin McConville is in the papers today talking about the Mayo gig and how he thought that Mayo team has a 3-year window to win. That they're like, he's seen loads of them and he was very excited about going in there. And then when that didn't happen, like Wicklow snapped him up straight away.
This is the embarrassing thing again for Monaghan, is that
maybe Oisin wouldn't do another. Would he not? Would he not do another Ulster team?
Maybe that was the reason. But he's currently managing club football in Monaghan in a scheme. They're into the County Senior Championship semi-final as of last weekend. He said when the Monaghan job came up, I'm not interested in the county management whatsoever at the minute. Then he takes the Wicklow job. So that to me was another rejection maybe for Monaghan, that he just didn't fancy that gig.
You're not even in the ball game for that one.
No, not even close. And then he goes and takes that Wicklow job, which and obviously he was on the undercard for one of the Mayo roles. I mean, why aren't these lads wanting the Monaghan job? I don't know. Geographically, it's a good one. You're only up the M1. It's not a million miles from Dublin or the middle of the country. You're going to get your expenses. Monaghan has a few quid lying up there as well. They have a few sponsors that have come on board in recent years, so there's a bit of money.
They've got a lot of talent.
Now,
the age profile of the team isn't great.
No, it's not. Like, obviously Darren Hughes and Conor McManus are reaching kind of the latter days of their careers.
But there's one last push, like just pie off the Ulster Championship and see how you get on in the group stages. Like,
yeah,
no one's going to want to be going to Clonus.
Well, that's the thing.
I know the Ulster Championship is all that matters to you. I know. But you've won it a couple of times. You know what it's like now.
A couple of times, but 2015 was the last one. Malachy O'Rourke was.
It doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, I know.
It actually doesn't matter. I know it's the greatest tournament in the world, but it doesn't matter.
But tell a Cork hurling fan or a Waterford hurling fan that the Munster Championship doesn't matter.
Cork are soft.
Well, maybe. Yeah, your words, not mine. But yeah, it's one of those things. Like, there are still a lot of young players coming through on it. I've heard of a couple of players. I think Niall Kearns and Ryan McInnesby potentially heading to Australia, so they won't be involved from on next year. So that's a couple of
travelling as opposed to
travelling, as far as I know,
right.
As opposed to playing Aussie rules. But and that's just a couple that you've heard of. But then there's a lot of young lads coming through. A couple of Monaghan minor and under 21 teams have done reasonably well in recent years. Won a couple of provincial titles. So there's players there. There's money in Monaghan. It's a decent job. They're a Division 1 team. I mean,
the split season, shorter year.
Exactly. I don't know why they wouldn't take it. And the club game in Monaghan is very strong. Like, even at the weekend there, Clontibbert and Scottstown, and Conor McManus was excellent for Clontibbert.
Are you all fighting amongst yourselves? Is that a bit of a problem?
Well,
you can tell us, Shane. No one's watching.
There might be issues in the county board in terms of, do we want an outside manager or an inside manager?
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of debate all the time about that in counties, but because you've heard Vinnie Corey's name come up and Owen Lennon's name come up within the county as well. Vinnie was part of Banty's backroom team, so maybe he wants to distance himself from it. But
from the outside, it has always appeared to me as if Monaghan is one of the best administered counties in the country. They were the first ones to come up with the star system around league games, where your inter-county players will play a set number of league games. Even when the whole rest of the country couldn't make anything work, Monaghan were making themselves work, and they were punching above their weight. So this doesn't make any sense. Now, maybe they're going to pull a rabbit from the hat, and maybe Niall Moyne is exactly the person you want at this stage of his career.
Potentially, yeah. I know he was involved as a selector and down through the years, but a long time ago for Monaghan. He was part of the Scottstown teams that won All-Ireland or Ulster club titles back in the days as well.
So he's a Monaghan man.
He's a Monaghan man now.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
Well,
Sorry,
it's a homecoming, no?
Yeah, he's a local voice, and very well known. Like, interested to hear Grainne McElwain's take on this as a fellow Scottstown woman of.
You're taking over today, yeah.
So we'll get her thoughts on it, but. It's a bizarre one for me because you see the likes of Ray Dempsey, not getting the Mayo job, and you're thinking, maybe he's obviously interested in intercounty management. Maybe he just wanted to manage his home county. But if he's really interested in intercounty management, why not take the Roscommon job or the Monaghan job or the Donegal job? So it begs and maybe Derek McGrath will have a say on this later on as well. Myself and Adrian spoke on AM a couple of weeks ago to Jack Cooney, the outgoing Westmeath football manager, about the stresses of intercounty management and just the fact that it's so. I was at there was a Galway Senior Football Championship double header on Sunday in Pearse Stadium, and I decided to head into it. I was in Galway anyway for a birthday party, and you're watching John O'Mahony manage Scéalta and Loughnaccara, and you're thinking, not many people around the country would know that John O'Mahony, double All-Ireland winning manager, is a club manager at Salt Hill. It's so under the radar. Now, obviously, within Galway, there's a lot of interest. But the difference in the public image and the pressure of an intercounty job compared to a club job is remarkable. And that's why a lot of these managers potentially don't want anywhere near the Monaghan job or the Roscommon job or the Donegal jobs. I mean, there's so much. That Malachy O'Rourke was essentially handed the Donegal job on a plate in the last month or so and said, nope, rather stay with Glenn.
Was it Carol Kane? It was on the piece that the lads did in the evening anyway, talk about the situation in Donegal, and they had Brendan Devaney on. He was like, Malachy O'Rourke, he's perfect. And then it was the next day, O'Rourke was like, no thanks. But I think it might have been Carr who said in that conversation that Enda McGinley said the next time he takes an intercounty job, he's going to have to take a career break.
Yeah.
You can't just be taking career breaks to be an intercounty manager. You need an employer who's going to be like, okay, you can stick with us, or like in Enda's case, I think he might be self-employed as a physiotherapist. But it's like, how do you do that? But really.
I wonder about it because even one of the names mentioned in Monaghan was David McCaig, he's now principal of St McCartan's College in Monaghan Town. That's a job that probably means
takes a bit of time.
Well, Colin O'Rourke is he not principal of a...
He's retired now, I think.
He's retired now, fair enough, so he has the time. But yeah, I can see...
Brian Cody did manage to be a school principal and also the greatest GA manager of all time.
It's not bad.
I do think that Cody had one of the greatest collections of players of all time, which is slightly underrated when it comes to, the job that he did. It was they were self-motivated as a group. I'm sure he set the culture, and I totally understand that, and that all that stuff is important, but...
but it's like Alex Ferguson, he built a number of eras. It wasn't just one great team.
Look, I guess my point is that it could actually be harder to manage. It might take more time to manage a group who are a little bit more idiosyncratic than that Kilkenny hurling team. They all came together, beat the shit out of each other, and were like, let's go, come on, we're on the same team. I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, but... you had Henry Shefflin and you had Jackie Tyrrell, and they were going up against each other like rutting stags and training every night. People weren't watching that and going, I'm gonna phone it in tonight. Whereas in other counties that don't have success, that don't have those characters, you actually have to go and put your arm around them and go, why aren't you putting in the full effort today? Why aren't you filling in your diet diary? We haven't seen your reps on you're not showing us the WhatsApp. What's going on?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. There's a lot more focus on it nowadays.
There is.
I suppose for Cody, the backroom team is so important, but with Cody, he was such a powerful figure in his own right that the backroom team was almost peripheral. Now that's harsh on the backroom team that were there. They obviously did a great job under him, but when there's such a big personality at the head of a county like that, I don't know, it's hard. Jim McGuinness was the same in Donegal, had a great backroom team, Rory Gallagher included. And yet, it was all the focus on the manager. I don't know why people aren't taking intercounty jobs. I feel like 3 or 4 years ago, everyone wanted intercounty jobs, and there was too many people for the positions. But now it's the entire opposite. Whether COVID has taught people they're just not arsed with the effort and time needed.
I don't know if COVID taught us anything about anything. I have to say, traffic is worse. Is worse than it was. People are nastier than they were. I don't think we've learned anything.
Forget pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's actually worse. It's now I'm going to show you my worst characteristics because I was keeping them in for a couple of years. It's 7:40. If anybody wants to get in touch, or if anybody's any theories about this,
we're actually forgetting the lead, Ger, which is the fact that I noticed on your Instagram that you were at Garth Brooks on Saturday?
I was.
You look, I didn't know whether to come in today and completely go two-footed into this, slag the living daylights out of you, and
you were mildly jealous. What happened was you were starting out in that, and you were like, Jesus, I should have gone.
I was just surprised because some people you look at, you're flicking through Instagram stories, and you're like, yeah, obviously everyone's at Garth Brooks. Not surprised that they are. But when I landed on your one, I was, Kelleher is the wider commuter belt from Dublin. Not many people in that vicinity are known to be people who wear the cowboy hats and the brown shoes and the Budweiser buckle belts and all the rest. So that, I have to say, it surprised me.
Yeah.
Now maybe you're not a fan of Garth Brooks and you just showed up for the.
Oh, I had a check shirt on. I had brown boots on. I had blue jeans. I didn't have a pair of Wranglers.
Boot cut. Obviously boot cut.
I mean, no, unfortunately. And look, there were Stetsons available. I should have gone full Stetson. The C&T in Marino is selling 2014 Stetsons, which literally say 2014 Garth Brooks on them. I mean, fair play to them. They're only a fiver. And you remember I was on the radio last week talking about how, fate. And Garth was like, I haven't brought it. So he cries every night.
You're on first name basis.
He cries every night. Yeah, well, he is definitely with himself. There was a weird third party thing going on. It was class. It was class. You have to go, right? Because there's 60,000 people who are mad into it. And every single word, they're like hanging on his every word. He's hanging on their every word. And it's so sincere. He talks about the sincerity.
Yeah, he's likeable.
Normally when you talk about sincerity, it's like, oh, I sincerely mean this. And no one
Hello,
ever...
Britain.
You're not sincere. If you're telling me you're sincere, you're not sincere. He was sincere as the tears flowed, and he did the kind of, this is my band, they've all been with me since 88, and you guys were here in 97, and then I haven't talked about this yet, and he starts talking about 2014, and it's like, wow, this is amazing. Did
he cry?
A lot, yeah.
Oh, did he?
Oh, yeah.
Right. Just went for it.
One of the people who was there was like, oh, it's 5 to 9. He's crying again. That's amazing. Look, he's right on schedule.
Producer Colin asking in my ear, did you cry yourself?
I did not cry. I mean, I was very happy. Like it is a cultural event that you need to go and see.
So yeah, I kind of regret it now. Obviously, still have a chance this weekend. I wasn't going to slag you too much because I'm actually buying early bird tickets tomorrow morning for Luke Combs, famous American country artist who's playing in the 3 Arena October of next year.
So you are a country man.
I'm a country man.
Heart.
Garth wasn't someone whose songs, look, I know 5 or 6 of his songs.
They don't speak to you.
They don't speak to me. Whereas Luke Combs has Beer Never Broke My Heart, another one called Beer Can. Beer comes up in a lot of these kind of southern American country artists' music quite often, and I just relate to it, so relatable. But Garth just wasn't someone I was madly, obviously knew 4 or 5 of his songs, but I mean, wasn't a super fan, so I just couldn't. Like, I've been to concerts over the
your entire county were there twice.
They were 18,000 people, 1/3 of the population. If anyone was going to rob a house in Monaghan, it would have been last weekend or this weekend coming.
I'd say they're all going 2 or 3 times, to be honest.
Probably, yeah. But then there's people outside. I was speaking to lads from Monaghan who are living in Dublin, and they bought tickets in Dublin.
Of course
they're not even counted in those figures.
No. But
so, Tyrone had 26,000 tickets bought, I think. So, it was between Tyrone and Monaghan. I
think Donegal, there was a fair representation of Donegal
I
too.
would imagine so. So it's a concert. I wish I went to Shania Twain a couple of years ago with my mum.
Oh yeah.
She said, I have 2 tickets to Shania Twain. What she didn't tell me was that the 2 tickets were slightly separate. So I was in between a group of 2 hen parties.
Oh, wow.
Which was fantastic crack. But Shania Twain...
Did you survive?
I survived just about. But the male percentage of that gig was not that high.
And no one else.
It was just me. But she put on a show, Shania. She was something else. So I'm not against the whole country thing. But yeah, maybe Garth this weekend if I can.
I think, if you haven't been... and you're in any way in 2 minds, because I think there's a lot of us were in 2 minds, but it's an incredible show.
Shane Keegan landed in here for Football Saturday on Saturday, and he was dressed the normal way a leash man would be dressed probably, but he was straight off.
Buckle,
the whole lot, and he was heading to Garth. And is it Gareth or Garth? What are we saying here?
It's Garth.
Garth. Okay.
Yeah, party on Wayne, party on Garth.
Colin thinks it's Gareth.
No, it's not.
Sorry, it's Garth.
It's definitely...
Adrian said it's Gareth.
It's definitely not Gareth. And the pub Kennedy's in Drumcondra has Garth Brooks Lounge. I'm like, lads,
you had one job.
Yeah. maybe it's shit posting on purpose. They did it on purpose. Everybody were like, oh. And then you realise a lot of people do actually get his name wrong.
They do. No, okay, yeah. What I don't understand about the Garth Brooks thing, well, you can be a fan all you want, but what I don't understand is why it's such a big cultural. Is it because of 2014, or was this a thing like?
Well, in 2014 he would have had the same devotion, if not more. Did anybody here have a ticket for 2014?
Is Bruce Springsteen on the same level in Ireland? He probably is. Well,
yeah, I'd say they're similar enough level.
But Springsteen's not going to make Reeling in the Years, but Garth Brooks 100% will every year he plays here. 2014 and 2022
we obviously lost our shit over it in 2014.
Yeah,
and the same thing happened again. I think it's because a lot of people don't understand it, and when you don't understand something you're like, what, explain this to me? And then you go and you experience it and it's like, I still don't really understand it. I see you're all having a good time. That's like, I'm delighted for you.
Yeah, I feel like I never really feel a sense of FOMO, but I strangely have a sense of FOMO now that I haven't.
I mean, yeah, and that's the correct response. So it's not too late. There's loads of tickets floating around. Loads of people bought like multiple tickets. You know.
Yeah. See, my mum's interested in going as well, and she hasn't got a ticket. So
you got to bring her. There you go.
It could happen.
You're manifesting that out in the world there. 7:46 this morning. If you want to get anything off your chest, football related, there is Premier League. There's Champions League football tonight. We're going to talk about that with Jonathan Wilson in just a moment. Here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock. Humphrey, Kelleher, and Grainne McElwain are going to join us at 8:10. What's this about?
So essentially, there's a new documentary on TG Carr tomorrow evening. Scéalta and Ger, I think it's called, and it's the story behind the GAA trophies I think there's 2,000 GAA trophies in the country.
Right.
Some of them have gone missing, they can't find them. But even just the history behind naming them, and like obviously there's some famous, I guess, Republican leaders named with trophies named after them. There's some people who we probably haven't heard of that we should have heard of, and maybe these trophies are less famous than maybe they need to be. But there's some fascinating stories behind them. I know Humphrey literally wrote the book on trophies as well. I think the GAA changed the rules on this earlier this year as well at Congress, where they basically said, because it was a free-for-all beforehand, because I think some club maybe in Tyrone had named a trophy after an IRA leader or something to that effect, and then they decided, okay, maybe not for that reason, but that was one of the reasons why they decided, right, the GAA subcommittees will put names forward, and then one name will be picked and put forward for ratification. There's a whole process behind naming trophies, whereas for years it was kind of just, you know, the local county or whoever makes the trophy up comes up with a name. After that, we're going to hear from Derek McGrath. That's at 8:30 this morning. If you have any questions around hurling and you want to get them in to Derek now, good time for that. Sports pages and news. John Duggan taking a victory lap after recommending that you back Shane Lowry at the weekend. Stephanie Roche is going to join us at 9:10, and then we're going to hear from Caitlin Thompson about Alcaraz and what we can expect from him for the rest of time. What do you think James McLean is going to do tonight in terms of the armband? Yeah, like a lot of people drawing parallels between the armband and the poppy. I'm not sure. Like the poppy, obviously, and James has been quite clear over the years that he doesn't wear the poppy. He has said, and I'm paraphrasing him here, but he has said that he doesn't wear the poppy because he would happily wear the poppy if it was to represent the British dead from World War I and II alone, but obviously it's not. So the armband is just to represent Queen Elizabeth, so I'd be surprised if he didn't wear it. Not that anyone really cares whether he does or doesn't in this country. They've managed to turn it into a big deal, right? It's always turned into a story. Like what I loved about the last 24 hours is hearing for the first time that Morrison's supermarket chain in Britain has stopped using the beep sound at the self-checkout in tribute to Her Majesty. So that was one of the more bizarre tributes I had seen. I know there's been an absolute plethora of bizarre ones, but that was, I think, where it reached peak. What the hell is going on here? There's talk now that a lot of medical appointments have been cancelled on Monday because it's become a bank holiday, and so people have been waiting for months and months and months for care, and then not going to get their care. So it's kind of tilting into something a little bit different as well. It's 7:49. If you want to get in touch with us this morning, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number, and we'll talk about that a little bit more on the show. You can always get us youtube.com/off the ball as well. Now, to the Champions League fixtures tonight, Jurgen Klopp is in the papers talking about the hard truths that the team had to face after getting annihilated against Napoli. I have to do something. I can't sit there and wait for how we react. Is this the situation I wanted? No, but now you're in it, you find it challenging. We had a general meeting showing these situations, and they're too obvious. It wasn't needed to say a lot about it, but I did anyway. Then it goes on. Did I question the players? Generally, no. In this situation, yes. Why would you do that?
Why would we do that? When James Milner arrives too late in a challenge and we lose at challenges where we would usually win, then you know something's wrong. There are 4 or 5 days now of absolute truth. We didn't hide anything. We didn't hold back anything. There was no need for that. Tonight's game against Ajax is a very, very big game for Liverpool as a result of the recent performances. I'm delighted to say Jonathan Wilson is with us this morning. Jonathan, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks. How are you?
This Liverpool game has taken on a very deep meaning after what Klopp is saying, and maybe a bit of misinterpretation around his post-match comments about needing to reinvent after the Napoli game. What do you expect from Liverpool tonight?
Well, I think it's a hugely difficult game. I mean, Ajax are playing really, really well. So before anything else, they've got to try and get 3 points. Got to try and get this Champions League campaign up and running. I think it's pretty difficult for them because they don't really have any players. The injuries have hit them to such an extent. It's not as many other players can come in. Not a lot of things you can change around. And you look at that side that played in Napoli last week, and maybe the fact they've had 6 days off. That's given them in a season when there's not much time. They have been presented with a bit of time to try and sort things out, and the fact they've got next weekend off as well now. It is sort of one game in a fortnight rather than one as a series of 4 in a fortnight. But they've got to first and foremost got to try and find some defensive solidity, which they'd lost. But that comes from the compactness that Klopp was talking about, and the fact that the spaces between the forward line and the defensive line, which I think he would ideally like to see at around about 25, 30 yards, had grown to an extent where there's loads of space and Napoli could play their way through. And it's not just Napoli. It's not this was a one-off game. Napoli was a team who were really able to exploit that. But I think you saw evidence of that even against Fulham on the opening day of the season.
So what is causing the compactness to not be compact anymore? Why does that happen?
Well, I think we saw it in the pandemic season as well. I think this is the issues are quite similar. That suddenly we're seeing Liverpool's defence looks incredibly ropey. And you're looking at Trent Alexander-Arnold saying, well, hang on, we were talking about this kid as being potentially one of the great right-backs in the world. But actually, when he's put under defensive pressure, he's not great. Virgil van Dijk, who's been the best centre-back in the Premier League for 3 or 4 years, suddenly looks vulnerable. He's given away 2 penalties already this season. You get a run at him. But the point is, people are getting a run at them. They're getting a run in behind Alexander-Arnold, or they're getting a run at Van Dijk. It doesn't help Van Dijk. He's had 3 different partners, which again, like the pandemic season, they kept on chopping and changing, and then he got injured as well. The injuries have meant they haven't had consistency there. But it's to do with, I mean, and it's very hard from the outside to know. It's either players are not responding in the way they used to, that they're not putting in that physical and mental effort to enact the pressing systems. Or it's that fatigue is set in and they're not able to do that. So whether it's a physical issue or a mental issue or some combination of the two, somehow those very precise, very sophisticated pressing structures, which are so characteristic of Liverpool at their best, they have broken down in the way they did in that pandemic season, when I think fatigue and a lack of time to put it right was pretty obviously the cause. So this might be to do with the age profile of the squad, which I think we knew was getting older. It might be to do with new players coming in, not quite settling yet. It might just be to do with the fact that Liverpool played an unprecedented number of games last season and a short pre-season, short close season. Everybody's still worn out. It might be to do with the fact with Jurgen Klopp's in his 8th year at the club, and eventually the impact of a manager starts to wear off, and no matter how charismatic he is, players start to drift a bit. And I think from the outside, it's very, very hard for us to know what combination of those factors it is.
Jonathan, just on that fatigue you mentioned, like it's funny now that Liverpool are going to be one of these Premier League clubs with essentially a month off Premier League action, the way the fixtures have panned out. Like, if you're Jurgen Klopp and in his position, do you reckon it's a good thing now that they're having this time to reset after a bad period, or is it a case that when you're playing that badly, you almost want the games to keep coming thick and fast in order to correct things?
No, I think this is good for them. I think this is really... I mean, it could cause problems down the line later in the season, but things were going pretty badly wrong. And I think once you get on a spiral like that, it's pretty hard to arrest. They suddenly do have time to arrest that. So I think this has probably worked out pretty well for them.
It's funny even reading Jamie Carragher's comments in I think it was in his Telegraph column in the last day or two as well. Like he's talking about the obvious things in the Liverpool team, but he mentioned James Milner, as you did, Jonathan, but he also mentioned Roberto Firmino starting big games for Liverpool this season. Like, this is a man in the last year of his deal, obviously playing for either a new contract or a move elsewhere, but like, I think Carragher's quote was that he's been in decline for the last couple of years, Firmino, and all of a sudden he finds himself in this position of starting big games for Liverpool. Like, would you go along those kind of similar lines, that Firmino is maybe lucky to be in the team, or have his performances so far this season maybe merited that selection?
I think he's been one of their better players this season in a pretty ropey selection. But I mean, really, who else is it? Darwin Núñez has been suspended, and Jota's been injured. So in that central role, there is nobody else. And as I said, I think he's actually done okay. But you're right, he's been in decline for a couple of years, and we saw his influence last season. Definitely, he'd begun to wane. But I mean, I think the whole balance of that forward line is problematic now. That you had that front three that was so effective, and the attributes of Mane, Firmino, and Salah, they made each other better, and they worked very well as a unit. Well, as soon as you begin to fiddle with that, you damage the balance. So Salah, I think, really hasn't played well since the Cup of Nations. Now, that might be the effect of the Cup of Nations, that was a pretty difficult tournament for Egypt. I know they got to the final, but they played pretty horrible football. Salah was often very, very isolated, up the pitch on the right, often 30, 40 yards of space around him, having to work very, very hard, pretty thanklessly, under huge amounts of pressure from Egyptian fans, Egyptian press. And then to lose it on penalties in the final, and then to lose that World Cup playoff to also to Senegal on penalties, that would take its toll. I think if you look at his shots per game, the first half of last season, I think it was around about 4.8 per game, and I think it's been something like 2.8 since. I don't have the figures here, but I remember looking it up last week, and it was something like that. There's been a dramatic fall-off in his shots per game. Now, that's, as I say, partly might be to do with him and his psychological, mental, physical state. But also, the other thing that happened in January was Luis Diaz came in. Now, Luis Diaz, I think by general consent, has done very well. He's settled very quickly. He's made a habit of scoring brilliant consolation goals. But if you've got him on the left and you move Sadio Mane into the middle, or Darwin Núñez as your centre forward, that's a different profile of player to Jota or Firmino, who would drop out and create space for Salah to go into. So Salah, of necessity, is having to play wider. He's not getting into the box as much. That in itself is probably enough to explain that drop-off in shots per game. And maybe he's sort of thinking, well, when he signed his new contract, was that really what he was signing up to not be the main man up front anymore, but to be this auxiliary figure on the right, rather than the sort of key figure in that front three. So I think Liverpool is just in one of those situations where everywhere you look in the team, apart from probably Alisson, there are issues with the balance, issues with individuals, and that forward line. Yeah, you can pick out Firmino and say that the fact he's playing suggests the injury problems they've got. You can look at Núñez getting himself suspended, which has frustrated everybody. I think there's been suggestions, certainly in Spain and Portugal, that Liverpool is starting to wonder whether he really was the player that they wanted. I think you look at Salah and say he's not playing particularly well. But you can do that in the midfield, you can do that in the defence as well.
It's a mad systems failure from start to finish, with as you said, the exception of Alisson. While there is a little bit of time here, there's also time for the team to stew in the difficulties. And Klopp is talking about the honesty that they've had. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. It's we seem to be at a hinge point anyway, where things could go really badly for the rest of the season. And when you list off the number of problems there are, you can fix one, but fixing them all at the same time is going to be very difficult, unless somehow Thiago wrestles the team into some kind of greatness on his own. Is that like, if I'm a Liverpool fan, my eggs are all in Thiago's back now, maybe he can start games for us.
Well, I mean, Thiago, I think, is very necessary to give him a bit of guile through midfield, and he can knit things together, and just the way he holds possession can help relieve pressure. So him coming back, not that you can rely on him, I think, to be fit for the rest of the season. I think that is a benefit. I think though, when we talk about all the problems at Liverpool, they're all interrelated. So if you fix one, you do then start to fix others. And I think these things can, just as they can fall apart pretty quickly, I think they can probably be mended pretty quickly. Say Darwin Núñez suddenly gets on a run and scores, 6 goals in the next 4 games or something. Thiago knits things together. Matip is fit, and he and Van Dijk reform that partnership that was so commanding. Then suddenly Alexander-Arnold look a better player, and confidence will spread. And if James Milner's not having to play, that relieves a bit of pressure on midfield. So I think the thing with Liverpool, the way they play, and it's in many ways it's the beauty of how they play, is such a. And I guess it's true of all great teams at the moment. It's true of Manchester City as well. These are very fragile, very complex mechanisms. One thing goes wrong, and it has a huge ripple effect. But equally, the opposite is true. That if you start to put them right, things can, I think, be mended pretty quickly. Obviously, if they're all knackered, that's a different issue.
Yeah, and can 3 days rest actually help a team in the middle of the season enough to allow them to recover the energy that they seem to have been depleted? It's very difficult for us to know, and I guess maybe at the end of the season we'll find out a bit more about it too. But certainly it's one of the most interesting case studies of the best team in world football over the last 18 months, or one of the most exciting teams suddenly becoming very, ramshackle in parts. That game against Napoli was like one of those games that I think we're all going to remember for a very long period of time, because it could really have been 7-1.
Yeah, it could have been. But I think what's really interesting is we've seen it before. I mean, don't forget, this is a team that lost 7-2 to Aston Villa 2 seasons ago. So we know that when things go wrong for Liverpool, they can go really, really badly wrong. I think even more than City, well, no, actually much more than City, Liverpool are a side who really play on the edge. And that's how they've overperformed in terms of their spending. That's how they're able to have kept so close to City for so long. City, I think, have a few more built-in safeguards. They can be a bit more cautious. They can hold possession. I think defensively they're a little bit more circumspect. Whereas Liverpool, it's hell for leather, and if you're playing that high up the pitch, and if you're playing with that level of intensity, and you're trying to overwhelm teams with that intensity, if that intensity drops, or if opponents can find holes within it, there's not much defence there to break through. So we saw it collapse 2 years ago. We saw it put right again last year. So I don't think the situation is in any sense terminal, but it is fascinating that it's happening again, and you do wonder how often you can fix that, particularly when you're looking at this season and it's just game after game after game after game for months and months into the future.
Jonathan, just to touch on the cancellation of I know 7 of the 10 Premier League games go ahead this weekend, but still we have those few fixtures cancelled. I know that the statements released hinted at the policing issues and everything else. I know you wrote, I think it was in Sports Illustrated, maybe you wrote during the week about the fact that you were in a cricket stadium, I think, when news were starting to filter through of the Queen's failing health. And you pointed out that maybe a sports stadium is the perfect place for people to pay tribute in their own little ways. Are you surprised now at this stage where we are looking at the games specifically cancelled this weekend? Maybe you can understand the Chelsea game at 4:30 on a Sunday evening, the day before the funeral, but then you have United Leeds in Manchester, a couple of 100 miles up the motorway, being cancelled earlier on a Sunday as well. So it's a bit of a bizarre one. Certainly people on this side of the sea are trying to make sense of it, but what's your take on it from over there?
I think it's actually much more understandable this weekend than last. Last, I think there was, what I was talking about in that Sports Illustrated piece was, I think an event like this, it's a national event, and a national event is probably best experienced in public, not just sitting at home watching on telly. And I say this as somebody who was absolutely not a monarchist. But I was sort of, looking forward to is a terrible phrase, but I was sort of sitting there at the Oval watching the rain come down on Thursday, thinking, if the announcement comes this afternoon and I hear it over the tannoy at the Oval with other people and hear their reactions, that is going to be incredibly poignant and incredibly memorable. Watching the flag being lowered would have been incredibly poignant and incredibly memorable. I was at the theatre last night, and because it was a royal theatre, there was a minute's silence, and God Save the King played after that. And that normally would put my hackles up. But last night I was sort of actually, this is really moving, and I will always remember that. And I think we could have had that in football last weekend. I think the policing issues make it unavoidable for certain games this weekend. South London at the moment is just crazy. I was walking through Westminster and Pimlico last night. So I actually went past Westminster Hall. just because that was where I was going. I wasn't going particularly to have a look. And there's barriers everywhere. There's police everywhere. They're talking about queues of maybe up to 20 miles long. So obviously that is a huge drain on policing resources. So I think Chelsea, in terms of proximity, plus the fact Chelsea-Liverpool obviously takes extra policing. I'm assuming the fact it's Manchester United-Leeds, it's just a high-risk fixture. So maybe they have to move in. I don't know if they're having to move police from Manchester down to London to cope with the crowds, or whether normally they move police from London up to Manchester to deal with a game like that. But I can understand that. And then the other game is Brighton Palace, which has been cancelled because of rail strikes, and now the rail strikes have been cancelled, but the game was already cancelled before that. So that's a pre-existing complication that isn't really to do with the funeral. So I think this weekend, the issues of policing, and I say this obviously as somebody with no great insight into how policing works, but I can understand that if the police say no, that we can't do this, fair enough. I think the previous weekend was where the mistake was made.
There are weekends, pardon me, later in March and April, which are kind of contingency weekends when most teams will be out of the FA Cup, where they should be able to make up these fixtures. Do you think it's going to be a significant issue down the line, or actually, if we'd had a really cold snap and everything had been frozen out for 10 days, they would find a way to make these fixtures work?
Well, I mean, this season of all seasons, I think it's going to be really difficult. I mean, I know there's the FA Cup weekends, but can you rely on Manchester United, Liverpool, Chelsea all being out of the FA Cup? I think there's a significant chance they all could still be in the FA Cup come quarter-final weekend or semi-final weekend. So I think, yes, that's a possibility, but you can't rely on that. This season, I just think we're seeing the chaos of the schedule at the moment. There's just too much in it. That there's no wriggle room, there's no breathing space. The fact the Champions League is coming, essentially 6 weeks in a row with an international break stuck in the middle of it. So all 6 games within 9 weeks. There's no space. There's no time to breathe. And what happens if we do get a cold snap in January? What happens if games are called off because of snow or because of frozen pitches? What if the rail strikes proliferate, which I think there's every chance they could? There's nowhere to go. So I think you're sort of seeing the folly of a fixture list that is as rammed as it is, quite apart from the impact on footballers and journalists. Let's be honest, we're all knackered as well. If you have to build in space for some cancellations, because whether for weather, whether for politics, whether for world events, whatever, games might have to be called off, and you want to keep it fair. You don't want teams going for a title or battling relegation having to play 3 games in 5 days or something.
We may well be on course for that as the season goes on. There's one last thing I just wanted to ask you about. From my perspective, you're in the middle of a discussion about what the definition of a counter-attack is at the moment. You've opened a can of worms that maybe you didn't even think was a can of worms in the first place.
Well, yeah. So what happened was I was saying the 3 goals Manchester United scored against Arsenal were not dissimilar to the sort of goals they scored on Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and I slightly carelessly said counter-attacking goals. What I meant was goals in which you use quick forwards against a high line. But I then think it's worth asking, what is a counter-attack, and indeed what is attacking? And I came up against this a few years ago when Louis van Gaal was manager of Manchester United, that Louis van Gaal would tell you his teams were very attacking because they always had the ball. So he would say they were proactive. If we've got the ball, by definition, we're attacking. I think it's more complicated than that. And you also see it with people who think, say, Germany at the 2010 World Cup, because they put 4 past England and put 4 past Argentina. Oh, they're a great attacking side. They weren't. They were counter-attacking. They sat deep and they played on the break. They played in transition. But for some reason, the word counter-attack has this, or maybe not counter-attack, but counter-attacking. If you say you're a counter-attacking team, it's got this sort of moral quality of someone being slightly dubious, which I don't think there's any reason why that should be. There's fundamentally 2 ways of playing, with the ball and without the ball, and both are fine for me. And your way of playing can be to try and draw the opposition on and hit the space behind them, or it can be to control possession and control the game that way and try and pick spaces in the way that, say, Spain did at the 2010, 2012 World Cup and the European Championship. It can be exciting or not exciting according to the team, but I just sort of think attack is a very, very hard word to define in football.
I don't know if it's true or not. I saw on Twitter yesterday somebody was suggesting that it was the anniversary of the famous Brian Clough, Don Revie thing.
Yeah, it's 48 years ago yesterday. Yeah,
the whole notion of we're going to do it better. We won't be counter-attacking, we'll be controlling the game. It's like, and Pep probably feels like there's a moral quality to not being a counter-attacking team, but the rest of us, as mere mortals, surely we want to win.
Yeah, well, I mean, and Clough wanted to win. I mean, look at his Forest side that won the league. They won 4-0 away at Old Trafford. I think was it Boxing Day, 77? And there's a great interview with Peter Taylor after that game. If it wasn't Boxing Day, it was December time, sometime. And there's a great interview with Peter Taylor where somebody, whoever's doing the interview says, "Oh yeah, what a brilliant dominant display," and Peter Taylor goes, "Well, you won't see that again this season." And they then just shut up shop, and they draw an incredible number of games 0-0 in the second half of that season because they've already got the lead and they're clinging on to it. So Clough was, for all this talk, he was quite happy to kind of draw games 0-0 if it suited him. But he would do that not by sitting deep, but by holding possession. You look at how Forest won the European Cup. Both finals were 1-0. There's a lot of 1-0s, a lot of 0-0s in those European campaigns. So, yeah, he could talk about playing the game in a beautiful way and holding possession. Forest could be pretty tedious to watch at times as well.
Just finally for me, Jonathan, you have the book out very recently, I think, on the lives of the two Charlton brothers, the life and times of Bobby and Jackie Charlton. Like, some great anecdotes, and I know I was reading an interview you did there recently talking about the influence of Match of the Day coming on board in 64 and 65, and I guess how that catapulted football onto a bigger stage, and that's probably something people of my generation don't appreciate enough, maybe. And I know you've spoken as well about I think, wasn't it on stage, the BBC Sports personality one year where Jack spoke very fondly about Bobby, but Jack is obviously someone especially who's revered in this country for obvious reasons. Were there any anecdotes or things you even learned yourself about the two brothers over your time researching the book?
Oh, it was a huge amount. I mean, I think with figures who are as well known as that, but there's two slightly different things you're doing with the book, or three. So the thing I actually really wanted to do was to put them in a sort of socio-political context, because I realised actually they represent two different strands of British life, or British and Irish life, in the late 20th century. The Bobby, very conservative, very sort of cautious. Jack, much more radical. And I think Jack, you can see very much comes through that sort of mid-60s Harold Wilson, White Heat technology, scientific systems-driven innovation, whereas Bobby was much more of the old school, and that's reflected both in football and their wider personalities. Then you're also trying to find just new details and so, I mean, a story that I certainly didn't know, and I suspect it's not particularly widely known, was when Bobby was manager of Preston, which didn't go well. He's only in charge for 2 years. He got them relegated, couldn't get promoted again. But the Preston didn't want to sack him. The Preston board didn't want to be the board who sacked Bobby Charlton. So they sort of contrived the situation to force him to resign by selling a player called John Bird to Newcastle. And the details of that, and the sort of slightly bonkers conspiracy. I mean, it almost feels like a sitcom. These sort of these business owners in Preston sort of running around trying to manipulate the situation. And what makes it even better is John Bird, who went on, actually had a very good career at Newcastle, and he's now a gallery owner and painter. He's like an artist, a really interesting bloke in his own right. So that was just stuff I didn't know. And then the other thing is going through the myths and actually sorting out what's true and what's not. Jack is somebody who myths accumulate around, and trying to work out what's true and what isn't can be pretty difficult at times. But hopefully, by talking to enough people, I've managed to sort of work my way through those and get towards something closer to the truth.
Well, hopefully you sell a gazillion copies of it, Jonathan. Great to have you with us this morning. Thanks a million.
Cheers, thank you very much. It's
Jonathan Wilson there, and I know that the Even Show are going to talk to him in greater depth about the book in the very near future. A reminder, OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. If you want to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you. Deja Dude says the country went nuts for Springsteen in 95. I don't think it was 95, because 95 REM played Slane, and he's saying the Independent on the day of Slane was wall to wall. The boss, I would have said 85.
Is that your mastermind subject? The years artists played?
No, I know that because I did my leaving cert in 95. And
Right.
REM we were at that. I think Garth was huge at that time too. I don't know. I think Deja Dude's having a little senior moment there. Danny Mac 1 says, early 90s Brooks was bigger than Guns N' Roses and Nirvana and Metallic in this country. It was embarrassing. I'd say he's probably still bigger than all those two. I did kind of think that maybe he's like the country version of David Gray, where this was the country that lost its mind for White Ladder.
Yeah.
350,000 copies of White Ladder sold. If you sell 15,000 copies in Ireland, you are platinum. He was 25 times platinum with that one album.
Which is pretty incredible. It's like our current generation, a lot of people maybe get manic over the likes of Harry Styles, but I feel like Garth Brooks is the Harry Styles for, I don't want to say your generation, Ger, but Culchies essentially.
Your people.
But see, I have a very strange personality trait, or not personality trait, but
you do.
I do, yeah. Anyway, but like I'm a townie from the country.
All right,
so
yeah.
I'm actually a townie when I'm in Monaghan.
You look down on the other people of Monaghan.
Well, you see, this is the problem. Everyone in Dublin thinks I'm a Culchie, and everyone in Monaghan.
Oh, we know
thinks
you're
I'm
a Culchie at heart, though.
Well, I am, sure. Yeah, I love the brown boots and the country music. So yeah, long may it. I went to Willie Nelson in Austin once, which was one of the highlights of my career.
Well, that's
my life. Sorry.
Yeah, that's totally loud. A reminder: Braeburn Coffee is the official coffee partner for OTB. Each week, we give one lucky viewer a €100 voucher to spend on some Braeburn coffee goodness at an Apple Green store near you. To enter, check out @OffTheBall on Twitter. Like and retweet our Braeburn competition post, and you'll be in the draw. Braeburn Coffee never compromises on quality or taste to give you the best on-the-go experience on the road. Available at Apple Green today. After the break, we're going to be joined by broadcaster Grainne McElwain and the former Dublin Hurling manager Humphrey Kelleher about a new GAA series starting tomorrow night on TG Gar. First, here's Pat Nevin talking about the week that's been for Chelsea Football Club.
Let's start with Chelsea then. Thomas Tuchel has released a statement saying this is one of the most difficult statements I've ever had to write. It's one I hoped I would not need to do for many years. I am devastated my time at Chelsea has come to an end. This is a club where I felt at home, both professionally and personally. It was interesting over the weekend. Jonathan Northcroft, for instance, had a really interesting piece in the Times. And he was certainly reporting a sense that Tuchel and Bowley was a case of water and oil. And we'll come on to Bowley and why he's picked Potter. But in effect, it seems Bowley is more into holistic type of management. And that's one of the reasons he's picked Potter. So one of the anecdotes in the piece was that Bowley came on the team bus after Chelsea had been beaten by Arsenal 4-0 on a pre-season tour. And he offered, as Jonathan Northcroft reports, reassuring words to the players, as in, not the end of the world and, everyone's great. Tuchel apparently was scoffing at the speech when Bowley left the bus. This was not the way that Tuchel obviously would have viewed a 4-0 defeat. So it seems this was just a mixture that was never going to last very long.
No, and I've got this horrible feeling where I've been there before, and it's so close to something I've lived through. I mentioned the fact of my time at Motherwell when and I came in as chief executive, and the owner had just bought the club, and there was a manager in place, and it was perfectly nice. It was perfectly okay, and it became so clear so quickly that wasn't going to work. There's nothing wrong with the guy, nothing wrong with his management. It just wasn't of the same viewpoint, ethos, you name it, whatever you want to call it, holistic approach, you can call it anything you like, but it was really, really clear that wasn't going to work. And I'm sitting there going, I'm chief exec, I'm going to have to sack this guy if we can find a way around this. And it wasn't nasty things, it was just a different view of how to go forward. One was, I wouldn't call it an old-fashioned view, but a very structured view of how you are a football manager. And there are kind of some incredible kind of echoes of that time for me, because Thomas, although I've talked to him a few times, and it surprises me slightly, he didn't want apparently any more control than just the team. And the idea of going out sourcing players and all that, he didn't want. That's so alien to what we think, certainly in the British game, because we think the managers want control and hands on everything, because in the end it all comes down in them. But some managers, certainly the guns for hire from abroad, they just want to do that job and concentrate on that job. And that really surprised me. And it's clearly not what Bowley wanted. He wants something, as you say, more holistic. It's a wider and bigger. And if I kind of drive that thought a wee bit further forward, it's clear that they've looked at where the success is with Manchester United, City, long-term manager, they know what the club's ethos is. Liverpool, long-term manager, then you know what they are, you know who they are, you know what they do. And they've stuck by the manager for a long period of time. So oddly, Chelsea get rid of the manager 100 days into the new regime, and people think, oh, it's just like the old one. You might be wrong. You actually might be totally wrong there. It may well be that they're trying to get rid of that concept and get somebody that they know they will work with long term.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Newspapers have called it the greatest club game ever.
Munster legends Alan Quinlan and Niamh Briggs are joining forces to bring you all the latest analysis, news, interviews and so much more.
The strength of Munster rugby has always been the big boys up front. There's a lot of pressure on these guys continuously.
I'm actually really excited for it.
The Red 78 with Alan Quinlan and Niamh Briggs. Available every Wednesday. Don't miss a moment of action. Subscribe to the rugby channel on the OTB Sports app and turn on your notifications now.
Celebrate European Week of Sport this September at the Be Active Festival. An action-packed day out for the whole family at Sport Ireland Campus, Blanchardstown. Come and try new sports, fitness challenges and skill tests at Ireland's biggest sporting festival. Meet sporting legends. Check out the Inflatable Zone, Village Food Market and much more. There's something for everyone at the Be Active Festival. Saturday, September 24th at Sport Ireland Campus, Blanchardstown. Book your tickets now at beactivefestival.ie.
If your business relies on a van, that wouldn't sound good. But this does. Get up to 75% off van insurance. Now available in FBD branches nationwide. FBD Insurance. Support. It's what we do. 75% no claims discount based on 5 years claims free. Available on new van policies used for farm or business purposes. Terms and conditions apply. Underwritten by FBD Insurance plc. FBD Insurance Group Limited, trading as FBD Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Now, tomorrow night around about 8:30 on TG Gara, a new 6-part series presented by Grainne McElwain called Scéalta na Gcorn will travel across Ireland visiting clubs and county grounds, getting the stories of the trophies. It's based on the book GA Family Silver by Humphrey Kelleher. I'm delighted to say Grainne and Humphrey are both with us this morning. Grainne, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, Ger and Shane and Humphrey. How are you keeping?
All very well. Thanks very much.
Good.
Lovely to see you again, Grainne.
Likewise. Good to see you too.
Where did the idea for this come from, Grainne?
Well, Hannah Nguhan is the producer in Imagine Media who was working tirelessly on this series, and she and Humphrey got in contact with each other. And obviously Humphrey has written a fabulous book about the family silver, which has been a Bible basically for the series too, in that we have used a lot of those cups and we've looked at a lot of those cups around the different counties. And also Hannah did loads of research as well on finding different cups and personal stories behind the cups as well in the series. So there are over 2,000 pieces of GAA silverware, Ger, which is huge. So we haven't managed to put all of those cups into this series. So hopefully there's enough interest that we'll be doing a second series on this. But it's been a fabulous journey, and I've loved every minute of filming it and finding out the history and the stories behind these cups.
Humphrey, why did you write the book? What was it that made you think there's enough here?
Well, interesting enough, Ger, I was doing commentary on the 2009 Leinster Hurling final with the great Micheál Murray. And the minor match was just over, and they're presenting the minor cup to the minor captain from Kilkenny. And Con Murphy, if you remember, Con said to me, "What's the name of the cup?" I said, "I don't know." Went to Croke Park, asked them, "Is there a book on the cups?" And they said no. So I decided, well, I'd write it. And I decided to write 101 cups, not just necessarily on hurling. It was on about camogie, ladies football, shinty, puck fodder, and the whole lot. And that is what's really, I suppose, as Grainne alluded to there, it could be nearly the definitive book on the GAA Cups and trophies.
One of the things you were saying there in the ad break was that there wasn't a cup for a long time for the All-Ireland senior football. Yeah. So what happened?
What happened was that the Great Southern and Western Railways, the railway company who obviously had money at the time, presented 2 cups for hurling and football. And there was a stipulation that if you won the cup 2 years in a row, you could keep it. And in football, Kerry were the first team, won it twice in a row. And then Wexford, great Wexford team came along and won it twice in a row. In fact, they won it 4 times, but they had it twice in a row. So I think the Great Southern and Western Railway said, well, we're not going to present any more cups because they were quite expensive at the time. So they were presenting medals. And my view is that in 1927, timing was quite interesting, that the FA Cup final was on, and a man called Tom Farquharson from Glasnevin was the goalkeeper for Cardiff City, who beat Arsenal in the final. And that match was shown on Pathy News in the cinemas. And they saw the presentation of the trophy on the stand in, I presume it's Wembley. And they said, well, maybe we better do something again about football. So they formed a committee.
So they got a bit jealous of seeing a dub up there carrying the cup, and they're like, oh, I want a bit of that.
Absolutely. And, you know, when you look, it was literally that year they set up a committee to, because Sam McGrath had died, and to commemorate his memory, they actually created this committee and raised money and got the cup made.
It's funny, Grainne, because like when you're, I assume in your research for the show, you're looking at a lot of periphery figures that maybe we haven't heard of but should have heard of. Like one of them that jumped out to me was Kathleen Mills, who is one of the camogie greats in this country, and yet her name probably isn't as recognised as perhaps it should or could be. But I'm sure there were plenty of examples along those lines across the research for the show.
There were huge examples of that, Shane, and that's what really struck me as well, is that most people know the names of the cups, but they don't necessarily know the reason why they were named after that person, and also the connection that it has with our past. So, you know, the GAA has a connection with the revolutionary past, obviously our cultural revival, mythology, all these different aspects of our culture that is reflected in our cup. So you have all these massive greats of Irish history, but you also have normal people, and people that devoted a lifetime of service to the GAA, who volunteered to do everything. And each of us that are involved in GAA clubs know someone like that, who does everything in the club when asked to do that for years. And I thought that was a lovely part of the programme as well, that the cups are named after volunteers that gave dedicated their lifetime to the GAA, and it was remembering these people. And I think that's really important, that is, we have that connection with their past, but you remember who these people were, and also the effect that it has on their families. Because when someone raises the JJ Nestor Cup or the Owen Ward Cup, people, you know, they raise the cup and they go, great, we've won a league championship or a county title or whatever. But also for the families, it's like, well, they remember who that person was that they loved the most. And that was really telling in a lot of cases when we spoke to brothers and mothers and relatives. They just said, like, they're so proud that a cup has been named after that person, that family member, and that just remembers their memory too. So that really stuck with me as well throughout the series, that it's more than just raising a cup, a piece of silverware, that there's actually a massive connection that people have with their families too. That was a really lovely part of the journey that I was on as well.
That was very interesting, Grainne, because there's one stands out particularly is Shane McGettigan, who'd be the son of Charlie McGettigan, who won the Eurovision Song Contest. And Shane was played for Leitrim, and he was over in Boston, and he was up in the scaffolding and working, and the scaffolding collapsed, and the poor man died. He was only 21 years of age. And then, of course, there's Cormac McAnallen, who died, the heart situation, and there's a cup named after him. And, the memory of the people, as time goes on, less and less people know about those people, as Grainne said. And this is what I believe is the marvellous reason why this, programme has been made, and to recall those people and keep them in the minds and hearts of people.
You're in Monaghan in episode 2, of course. The Monaghan takeover continues.
Exactly.
Rightly so.
Rightly so, exactly. I couldn't get it started in episode 1, Shane, so we're in episode 2 anyhow.
Not bad.
No, it was great. I mean, obviously, another thing as well is that we have that connection with our immigrants as well, and so many people that have emigrated, and that love that they have for the GAA, which we see still today in all the overseas action of GAA. But a lot of people that would have went abroad, like the Owen Ward Cup, for example, I think that was 1930 that was presented by Owen Ward, who's from Aniala, in Monaghan. And he was working in London and came up with the money and presented that cup. It was the Monaghan Cup. And similar to what Humphrey was saying about cups, and there was a stipulation with this cup, is that if whatever team won it 3 times, were allowed to keep it. Of course, people thought, sure, no one's going to win this cup 3 times in a row. And it wasn't my beloved Scéalta that did it that time, but it was actually Donaghmoyne who won it 3 times in a row. So they were allowed to keep the cup. So the county board were going, okay, well, hang on a second, we can't have this happening, or we're not going to have any cups. So basically they changed it then to the Owen Ward Cup, and it was an annual cup that you had to give back. So there's a lot of those stories as well in the series, lads, too. You know, that people that went abroad and raised money for medals and for cups and presented them back to county boards. So there's a link also with all the people that went abroad and continued working tirelessly for the GAA in their adopted home country, but also that connection they always had with home, which we all still have, even though you might have left the area that you're from, the club that you're from. You always have that massive pull and that massive connection to it. So that's a feature in the series as well. But Monaghan was great. Like, we look at rounders, there's massive rounders in Carrickmacross as well. You know, we look at that too. And then Pauline Devlin, you know, she was a fabulous lady who was involved, actually was my teacher actually in St. Louis in secondary school. She was a PE teacher when I was in Monaghan, and she was a gorgeous woman from Castleblaney who was a camogie player but died very, very young. And there was a cup named after her as well. And she started football for girls in Castleblaney. So there's loads of different stories as well. And Pádraig Duffy, of course, his dad is the McDuffie Cup, is named after his father. So we speak to Pádraig. And the cup that came before the McDuffie Cup was the American Cup, which is really interesting. And it was actually for the Senior County Championship as well. It's retired now in the museum. So there's lots of the cups that have been retired that people have never heard about. Like, I hadn't heard of the American Cup. Obviously, you know the McDuffie Cup very well, but just found that connection really, really interesting as well. And obviously, Scots and I've been lucky enough to have hoisted the McDuffie Cup on numerous occasions. So again, it's just a lovely connection for Pádraig, and you see how proud he is, you know, when that cup is raised and that connection with his dad. So there was a lovely theme throughout the whole story and I had the whole series, and I really enjoyed it.
One of the other themes here is that you've talked about people who have passed away. Is there a stipulation around that, or how do they name cups, Humphrey?
Well, there's a variety of different names on cups. In the early days, the GAA didn't really have any money, so they went to the clergy. You have the Hartley Cup, you have the McGean Cup, you have the McCrory Cup, and
they were all clergymen, were they?
They were all clergymen because
Right.
they were the people who had the money. And also they went to the newspapers, the Irish Press Cup, Irish Independent Cup, the Anglo-Celtic, you know, for the Ulster Senior Football Championship. And they were very limited in how they could actually get the money. But nowadays it's much more, you know, they have the money now, and obviously the Nicky Rackard Cup, the Lowry Marr Cup and Chris Ring, so they have those. But what people tend to maybe not to bring into account is the design of the cup, the layout of the cup, the maker of the cup, the degree of intricate design that's in those cups. And people must keep in mind the people who made the cups, especially the big cups, the Sam Maguires and the Liam McCarthy cups. They're a tremendous time, and there's a huge, I suppose, influence of the Huguenots when who were thrown out of France back in the 1600s, because the Stauntons, who made the Sam Maguire and the Liam McCarthy and the National Football League Cup, they were part of that people that came to Ireland in the 1600s. So they brought over the silversmith skills into this country. And that's where it really all started. So that's, people have to remember
so
those
it's
things.
into the history of the country as well. But do you have to be dead to get a cup named after you?
Well, I don't think people want to die to get a cup named after them, Ger, but it certainly does help. But then, I think there is a rule within the GAA that you're not allowed. But the latest football, and of course the latest did change it, where the Camogie Cup and the Brendan Martin Cup, thankfully both of those people are still alive.
It's funny, Grainne, because I was reading into the episode 3 where you go to Antrim as well, and John Goff is a name probably unfamiliar to most people, but the referee for that famous 1983 All-Ireland football final when the Dubs beat Galway, the 12 Apostles. I think Brian Mullins hasn't spoken to John probably since that day. But like, it's so interesting because you're hearing stories about people like John Goff, and what people don't realise is there's silverware for referees as well, which is something that I hadn't considered.
Yeah, exactly, Shane. I was the exact same. I didn't realise that referees actually get a medal as well, an All-Ireland medal, when they do the All-Ireland final, which is actually, why wouldn't they? It's a lovely touch. So yeah, he spoke about that, and he had his medal and he showed us. So he goes through all that. the incident of what happened, and still firmly maintains he was dead right sending off those players. And when you look back at the footage, I think it's kind of hard to argue as well. It was a tough game to referee. But again, the eyes of the public, everybody's watching you referee the game. There's a lot of pressure on referees, and as we do know how difficult of a job it is, it hasn't changed in that way, being very difficult. So an absolute gent of a man to speak with, and he was very proud, obviously, of his refereeing career and getting that medal. But it was a tough game to referee in an All-Ireland final, without a doubt.
It's funny because Humphrey, I was listening to an interview Grainne had done previously where she was talking about the hope that maybe they could find some of the missing silverware. Like, everyone knows the story of Jules' Rimet trophy, and was it Pickles the dog that found the trophy eventually? But like, there's a lot of GAA trophies that haven't been discovered in years, and maybe the hope is that this documentary could lead to at least some discoveries.
I'm sure there's some in people's attics don't realise how important it is to keep those cups, and the museum in Croke Park is a marvellous job in getting some of those back. But when you look across the whole spectrum of the GAA, the great thrill of the player going up onto the stand and getting that cup and saying the immortal words to Anas, Orum and Conchar Daka is something that everybody wants to do, and pick up that cup. And there's a very sad situation back in 1964 when the All-Ireland Minor Hurling Cup was the final was on in Leinster, and the Leinster final, and Laois beat Kilkenny in the final. But Wexford, who were the winners the previous year, didn't bring the cup.
No.
So the Laois captain, Billy Phelan was his name, never got the opportunity to go up that step and say those immortal words, and Laois haven't been there since. So it shows the importance. But I think he did get the cup eventually, I think, later on, but not on the day. So the cup has a huge part to play in people's tradition. And it's interesting, if you ever watch the series or the All-Ireland finals and watching the cup being presented by the presidents, how the captains take the cup. It's amazing the different types of people grab the cup, people pick up the cup without being presented. And I see at the moment Larry McCarthy, who's the president of Tyrone, ensures that he gets the shake hand of the captain and present him with the cup. For many years, the captain of the team got a miniature replica of
for themselves,
right? Which was a great thing to have, but I don't think to do that anymore.
It's funny because I was reading in the different names of the I guess the main provincial tournaments in Ireland. But am I right in saying the Munster Senior Football Championship has no official name for the trophy?
Or the Munster Junior Football, and this year, or last year I think it was, that in 2022 they decided to name this Munster Senior Hurling Cup after the great Mick Mackey. So there are a number of cups with no names on them, and I asked the reason why. At the time they said just politics,
right?
Basically, who would they call?
I presume it's all politics about who are you, what current group decides who is worthy of having a cup named after them. It is interesting that the LGFA and the Camogie have cups named after the people who presented them.
Yes, indeed. Jack McGrath, the cup, and he's still alive in Cork, and alive and well, thank God. So it maybe they'll change. People do deserve it, but there are people who have passed away that certainly would deserve to be called the Munster Senior Football Cup. It would be a great, I suppose, honour for their family to have the cup named after them.
Go on, Grainne, sorry.
So just coming just in Monaghan, actually, when you're talking about, because ladies football, Colossus de Oriel presented 3 cups, the Ulster Colleges football scene, and there are 3 cups that are named after McAnespy's, the huge ladies football families, McAnespy's, the Courtneys, and McNally cups. So in that, Bridge McNally is one of the students in Colossus de Oriel at the time. She was getting that cup, and she's obviously from that McNally family. So it was just really interesting. I've never met anyone really that has got a cup that is basically about themselves, you know. So it was just interesting chatting to her about what it was like to get a cup that's named after your family. So
it's interesting in that, Grainne, there is one man after whom 3 cups are named, and it's the Leinster Minor Football, the Ulster Minor Football, and the Louth Minor Football Cup are all named after the same man, Father Murray. So
and actually that features in our Donegal episode as well, Lorcan O'Murray. And I think as well, when we're talking about the clergy too, they did a lot of work in the area, and he was credited for bringing like electricity and water, running water up to Ranafast area up in Donegal as well in the Scéalta. So like he has 3 cups exactly. There's not too many people that have 3 cups named after them, and he features in our Donegal episode. Father Lorcan O'Murray.
It's mad, Grainne, because you see trophies named after like I suppose, famous Republican leaders in Antrim, like Roger Casement, I think, and Terence McSweeney, former Lord Mayor of Cork, has a trophy as well. But then you see, and I saw names in the blurb for the series as well, like the Little Nora Cup in Cork. Like, what's the history behind that one, for example?
That's a great story. That was a cup. There's a man called Tom Lyons who's written a book about it down in Cork, and we interview him, and Tom is from Dunmanway, and he basically wanted to find this little cup. I'm not going to go into. You'll have to watch the whole. You have to watch the program, Shane. I won't go into the whole history of who Little Nora was and what she was. But anyway, Tom was writing a book about her, and he was looking for the cup. He wanted to present the cup at his launch of the book. And nobody knew where the cup was. The cup was supposed to be in a bank vault. The supposed was supposed to be really safe. And everywhere, nobody could find it. So what he did is both traditional Irish way. What we did, he wrote a column in his local newspaper, and he said, "Look, I'm looking for this cup. Does anyone know where this cup is?" And within 24 hours, a young lad had said to his dad, "Do you know what, Dad? I think that cup's under my bed." So basically, he got the cup, and the cup was reunited in time for the launch. So it was a Little Nora Cup, and it had been down in Cork. And for nearly 50 years, and basically it was a happy ending to it. But as Humphrey was saying earlier on, there's a few cups in the series that are still missing, and I just hope that when people see this, it'll jog their memory. Like, one of them is the Inky Flaherty Cup in Galway, and basically it's for the Connacht Senior Hurling Cup. It was in 1995, and it went missing in 1999, and the competition stopped because just of lack of interest in Connacht for this competition. So, but the cup is missing, and we'd love to find that cup. So somebody has that cup. Galway were the last recipients, so somewhere has that cup. So it'd be great if we could find it. Yeah. Under students' bed somewhere, or I don't know.
Tomorrow night, 8:30 on TG Kelleher. Grainne and Humphrey, thanks a million for joining us this morning. I think loads of people are going to have memories jogged, hopefully, and also learn a lot about our history. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Best of luck with the TV series.
Thank you very much.
My good lads.
OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish today. Up next, we're talking with Derek McGrath. First, here's a quick few thoughts on Rory McIlroy's current form.
It was just an amazing last hour in particular there when Ram had set the early target with 62, and you knew that Lowry and McIlroy had scoring holes to finish with. And could they catch him, and how would things play out between the two of them? And McIlroy missed a putt on 18 for eagle, which
just
ordinarily that would fall the other way. He was bemused, and there was a lovely moment afterwards where the mics were there and you could hear Shane Lowry and McIlroy talking to each other afterwards, and Lowry said, "I don't know how that putt dropped," and then they were slagging each other. And McIlroy had beaten Lowry at Wentworth in 2014 in similar kind of fashion, and so I think Lowry said to McIlroy, "It's 1-1 as in our Wentworth duels," and he said to Rory, "You've won enough," and McIlroy was very happy for him, kind of made a real point of running down to give him a hug. But like, for Irish golf, it was an amazing thing. This is the flagship event. Wentworth on the European Tour was the best European Tour competition in quite some time that I can remember, and I think Larry is right when he says he's playing the best golf of his career this year. I think, and it's odd-ish to say it given he hasn't won a major, but I think McIlroy is actually playing the best golf of his career at the moment as well.
In terms of consistency, and every time I turn on golf at the moment, Rory McIlroy is like striking the ball beautifully. His putting seems to be, you know this better than me, but his putting seems like, in terms of consistency, seems like it's up there with where he's never been before almost.
He looks like he enjoys putting again, which you haven't said about McIlroy for a very long time, and that's Brad Faxon's effect. And then the key thing is, last year with his wedge play, he was genuinely like 200th on tour.
Wow.
And now he's up to like number 1 or 2 wedge play. It's been like a transformation.
So Humphrey Kelleher left his book behind and pointed out the CJ Hawley Cup. The presentation of a trophy in 1976 by Charlie Hawley to Corla Cléachor helped set up a senior women's rounders championship. I didn't realise this, but Hawley played for Vincent's minor hurling and football and won in 42, and then also played for Parnell's when they won the 45 senior championship. It's like, what? So he switched clubs.
Shane Walsh of the past.
Yeah, and like, it's just down the road, you know. So maybe when he moved out to the mansion, that was, Parnell's was closer. I'm not sure too many other people on that Parnell's team would have been living in mansions or owning islands.
Yeah, it's funny. The trophies is something that we absolutely do not think about. Trophies are handed off to players and captains, and we just leave it there and never think about them ever again. But yeah, you forget that there's names and histories and stories behind each and every single one. So, fascinating story.
OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish today. We're going to talk hurling with Derek McGrath in just a moment. If there's anything you'd like to talk to us about this morning, we would love to hear from you. The Liverpool fans are a little bit concerned about what might happen tonight. Interested to see if Jurgen Klopp can work a miracle in 4 or 5 days. We'll see. We'll talk about that in a few minutes' time, but I'm delighted to say Derek McGrath is with us. Derek, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Morning, lads. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good, very good. There's a couple of things we wanted to talk to you about. The situation generally in hurling at the moment. Big Dan announced that he was retiring from all hurling during the week as well, and we thought we may take a moment to just... because he's kind of one of those figures who transcends his local county and becomes a national icon, and there's not that many hurlers who manage to do that. So what was he like to work with?
First of all, I suppose he's done it all in the game. I was lucky enough to play with Dan even as I'm in '94 and played with him under 21 for 3 years, and obviously he went on to have a very successful career in '98 when Dan probably came to kind of national prominence in terms of, the '98, the famous Munster final of '98. So to work with him first and foremost as a player growing up, started off obviously as this kind of young, gangly. I would have always said when we were playing him level, even that he was nervy at that stage. We kind of thought we would have been able to get to him, but that when he got to 17, 18, obviously, he was brilliant in the air, and obviously 2007 saw him kind of win Hurler of the Year. So he was a brilliant guy. In terms of working with him,
we're just having a bit of trouble with the line there, so we might come back to you and see if we can get a slightly better connection for 2 seconds, just to make sure that everybody can actually hear that. So yeah, one of the things I think I think Dan is kind of in that period where players still didn't have helmets.
Yeah,
and kind of just goes over that period where it was just easier for I don't know, not easier, like obviously, but to be super recognisable as an individual.
Yeah, he certainly transcended his sport as well as his county, and like the fact that I didn't realise he was 45 now. Looks well for 45, but even to be playing for Lismore at 45, you might say, oh, that's grand, it's club hurling, but still a high quality level of championship. I think he said maybe after his retirement to WLR that he played maybe a year of junior club, a year of intermediate club, and ever since it's been senior club championship for his club. So I mean, he's been playing at a high level, not just at intercounty but at club level since, and the fact that he's 45 and has still been doing it, quite remarkable. And I know the news has come in today or yesterday that he's going to be joining the Laois backroom staff, I think, as well, nice, with Willie Maher. So he will be kept busy but I think it's not the last we'll be seeing of Dan Shanahan. Certainly he'll be in an intercounty job at some stage.
We've got Derek McGrath back with us. Sorry, Derek, you were just saying to bringing him in as part of your backroom team.
Yeah, and look, I suppose the insecurity I would have had, I suppose, as a manager is the fact you didn't have a kind of this prominent inter-county career. So who do you go to in Waterford? So look, you go to friends first and foremost. But he was, having done all he had done in the game, there was never a sense when he was imparting information of kind of, boastfulness or anything like that. He's, people see Dan and they see the tattoos and they kind of judge from afar. But he's a very affable, very nice guy. You know what I mean? And very, very gentle fella. In actual fact, really, really gentle man around the group. But in an era where with Justin McCarthy, where he was ghosting in for goals, and you talk about the Lark Corbett movement under Eamon O'Shea, I think Dan was kind of ahead of the game when it came to kind of movement off the ball and kind of, as I said, ghosting in for goals. And he would be very good at imparting all that information. Even at the weekend there, he was involved with Colligan junior team. They bridged the gap, winning the junior here in Waterford for the last 37 years. They hadn't won it. He was involved. I think he's going to be involved with Willie Maher in Laois now as part of the backroom team, and he'd be a brilliant addition, brilliant coach, brilliant skills coach in particular. In terms of the speed of your hurling, loves it, and hugely dedicated to the game and to Lismore particularly.
Derek, I was actually listening on Sunday's show. Brian Kerr and Kenny Cunningham were in studio here with Joe, and Brian was sitting in this seat talking about Kenny right beside him, about the leadership qualities he possessed and why he picked him maybe why he was a captain for the Republic of Ireland. Like, as someone who played alongside Dan, bringing him into your own backroom team as well, like, you must have seen some leadership qualities that he possessed, and clearly that was something that was one of his strong points.
Well, he has. Look, what's needed in Waterford often is he has passion anyway. First of all, he actually loves Waterford. He loves Lismore, so there's a pureness there to what he's doing, and almost an innocence at times, if that makes sense. In terms of the, he kind of, when you look at him physically, he's obviously this imposing specimen. As I said already, it's just the whole ability to be able to impart stuff in a manner that's very ordinary, and huge passion. And sometimes, that's needed on a line. And over the years, we were kind of, he's very funny too. Dan is, is a great wit about him, a great kind of sense of kind of what's on the ground in terms of what's been said in both Lismore and Dungarvan and West Waterford in general. He'd feed that information without it becoming kind of overburdening. He works on an oil truck, and people love to see him coming to their houses, like to fill the tank, if you like, because he just, as I said, has that kind of affable kind of lovely character, if you like, and he might go in there after a good or a bad day with Waterford, either as a player or a selector, and he's the same kind of jovial self, and that's difficult in itself. So he's been able to manage that over the years in terms of being a kind of a local, he's been able to manage that kind of characteristic of his own kind of personality that. He's able to kind of, take the criticism, take the good times, and somewhere in between lies his character, which is a really good character.
Yeah, totally. Didn't Christy Ring do the same thing? Am I right in saying that?
That's right.
There's a long line of.
Yeah, and look, and I think I heard Shane talking about the fact that he's playing senior hurling. Like he's marked Conor Prunty, he's marked Barry Coughlin, he's marked the best of fullbacks in Waterford and held his own over the last number of years as well. So it wasn't just a case of kind of standing there on the edge of the square. He's been well able, and he's contributed greatly to Lismore over the last number of years.
Yeah, no doubt. Can I ask you about your own managerial career? What stage are you at the moment? Are you happy to be out of the game? Are you like having taken the lessons of the last number of years, processed them and ready to go again? Where do you stand at the moment?
Yeah, good question. I thought you might ask. Yeah. Look, I suppose I left it in 2018. Since then, I've been involved with last 2 or 3 years. I've been involved with Leash Minors. We had a great success last year, getting to the Leinster final for the first time in a number of years. So look, I've enjoyed that. I suppose I've enjoyed not the less pressurised environment of kind of almost a kind of a sub role or a role in the background. My own young lad, my oldest boy, is going into 5th year here in De La Salle inside in the school. So the plan, I suppose, at family level was as much as possible to kind of maybe get him through the leaving cert. Not that I'm directly involved in his leaving cert or anything like that, but just, I suppose, in terms of the family environment, you're hoping to kind of maybe my youngest boy then would be kind of heading into De La Salle College in 1st year. So the plan was hopefully to not stay out of it for another couple of years. Not that you can't pick and choose where you're going to be, or you have no divine right to be involved in any team at that level. So yeah, I'm in the middle, I suppose, of trying, I suppose, to get better at, learn from it. I'm heartened by the way the game has gone, believe it or not. I know people would probably say the opposite, but I'm heartened that things that perhaps that we were involved with integrating over the years in terms of tactically are now part and parcel of the game. So I'm heartened in terms of where the game is going and where it will continue to go. So I'm thinking strongly about being involved over the next couple of years, but I suppose the opportunity has to be right, and family life in particular has to allow it to happen, if you like. Not that my wife would in any way stop me, but I suppose it's your own personality wanting to contribute at home as well,
Your name invariably, Derek, comes up when big inter-county jobs. I think the Dublin and Waterford jobs, particularly this summer, your name was certainly mentioned in the rumour mill before those jobs were filled. Like, is it the case that myself and Ger spoke at the top of the show about how Monaghan and Donegal and Roscommon can't seem to find a manager this summer and to replace their outgoing managers? Is it a case that the club game and the lack of public focus and pressure in club game compared to the inter-county game just puts a lot of people off at the minute?
It's hard to know. Look, I can only speak personally in that I found it, you listen, not that I'm comparing myself to Brian O'Driscoll or anything like that, but you listen to the aftermath of someone that's involved at the level O'Driscoll was involved in over the years and the struggle. I don't think I struggled, but what you do is I'm speaking personally, you miss the busyness of it, you miss the pressure of it in actual fact, and that sounds counterintuitive to say that. So for me personally, no, I don't think the appeal of the club championship is, on a personal level, is that like, it's less hassle and it's less stress, etc. For me, it probably suits at this particular time in your life, but I think there's no buzz like being involved in an inter-county dressing room at a particular level that you're not used to, you're accustomed to. But I can imagine that it's probably the scenario where, post Andy McEntee's retirement from Meath, even pre-Colm O'Rourke's appointment in Meath as well, where they both spoke about, the level of scrutiny, the level of kind of discussion that goes around, the level of kind of rumour and innuendo, and I don't think you learn to live with that, but I think we're getting better at that, if you like, in terms of the management of you kind of live in your own bubble of listen, we're giving it everything we have, and certainly that's the way I would have kind of approached it over the years. I would have been, less sensitive as the years went through it, and I think now that you're out of it, I become even more kind of, not as sensitive to kind of criticism or that. I think you just get used to it and you kind of move on. But that's not for everyone, you know.
Could you manage outside Waterford, do you think, like on a personal level, you know, would you have the enthusiasm and would you be able to do it?
That's a good question, because you kind of, you know, and I think it's probably well versed, if you like, that I had a serious connection with the players over the years, and in order to kind of not sever that connection, the last number of years I'd say I've been almost kind of nomadic in terms of my connection with the players that I was centrally involved with. In that I didn't text it for fear that you'd kind of accused of being behind the scenes or kind of hanging over them, etc. So yet when the Waterford job came up this summer, you talk about it with your wife for a minute. You kind of say, will you, 6, 7 or 8 years ago, I got my club to nominate me. I go around about the whole process because you want to do it. And now you're kind of contemplating, kind of saying to yourself, look, not now, you've no divine right to do it, but also the connection is pulling you, I suppose, in terms of the players that are involved still centrally to the team. So to answer your question in terms of being involved with another team, the answer is probably yes, but I think you probably have to change your methodologies. In terms of connection over the years, for me, was based on my school connection with a lot of those boys that were central to the Waterford thing. And you're in Waterford, you live in Waterford, you love the players, you love what you're doing. You'd have to really work hard on that connection part. That's part of any manager's philosophy, but that could be achieved too. So yeah, I wouldn't rule it out, certainly. Yeah.
Derek, just want to get your thoughts, I suppose, on the man who did get the Waterford job, Davy Fitzgerald, and I know Peter Queally and Owen Kelly have gone in there and his backroom team as well. That's come out in the last couple of weeks. And I know you had high hopes for this Waterford team last year, and maybe it didn't materialise in the end for them, but there's still a lot of talent in that squad. How do you expect Davy to fare? Like, is the pressure on him from the outset?
Yeah, I'm not so sure, because I think no more than myself, in terms of, you learn in punditry and you learn from over expectation on the back of the league final. First of all, it's a hugely talented group of players that will probably be, added to by, albeit Patrick Fitzgerald didn't light it up for Ballygunner the weekend, but Patrick and Mark Fitzgerald, I think, will have an impact on the team next year. So I think there's a kind of a more realistic expectation now in that, becoming one of the 3 teams that qualifies from Munster will be ultimately the aim, and I think Davy fancies that. And if you watch and if you look at Davy's kind of track record, even when he came in 2008 in Waterford, all the way up to his involvement in Wexford, I think Davy has a really, really good bounce kind of factor, and I think there'll be a bounce there. There's excitement. I know that Desi Hutchison, in his speech even on Sunday there after the match, he kind of thanked the county board for the appointment. So I think the earlier kind of, not negativity, but pessimism that seemed to kind of greet it at some levels in Waterford has been replaced by an excitement. After all, the man has won Munster Championship with Waterford, Leinster Championship with Wexford, All-Irelands as a player, All-Irelands as a coach. And I think the one thing I think Davy doesn't get enough credit for, because sometimes the animation can kind of allow people to have a particular opinion. I go back to even 2008 with Waterford. Davy was the first man I knew that, he put Owen Kelly in on the edge of the square. John Milan and Owen McGrath were 35, 40 yards from the goal, and the half-forward line were way deep back in his own half of the field. And similarly with Clare in 13, etc. So I think Davy is a lot more tactically flexible than people give him credit for. I think people wedge him to the sweeper system, but I think you'll see kind of, a nice flexibility. And I think tactically that Waterford team will buy into that. I think they like the mixture of structure and expression, and I think Davy will bring that.
Derek, I know you've got to go to class. You're very good. It's always fascinating to talk to you. Thanks a million for your time this morning. Cheers.
Not a bother, lads. Mind yourselves.
That's Derek McGrath there.
Bye-bye.
As I said, always really interesting to hear his thoughts. And there's somebody who will be involved in county management again in the future. And when he comes back, I'm looking forward to seeing what he does.
I'd love him to cross codes to Gaelic football.
Maybe we'll get the Monaghan gig.
Well, Liam Sheedy was on the Monaghan backroom for the last couple of years. There's no reason why. I think that's kind of started in the last couple of years, where guys in hurling have gone into the backroom teams of Gaelic football, and we've realised that it's not that big a leap. It mightn't be a head coach role, but of course they can still add something in the dressing room and motivation.
Anthony Cunningham, you would say, had a relatively successful time at Roscommon.
Yeah.
It's 8:58. Here is the Mystic Man himself. This is John Duggan with another extraordinary prediction from last week. Have a look.
Shane Lowry, this is it. This is it for Shane Lowry. Finally at Wentworth. He's the headline tip at 16-1 for 5 each way. Look at this record at Wentworth. 9 top 20 finishes in 12 starts. And we're like 4 times inside the top 6. We know he's had a really good year, but he hasn't won. Tied third at the Masters, nearly won the Honda Classic, has been 4 times in the top 10 on the PGA Tour in the United States. This is Shane Lowry's ballpark. It's his alley. He loves this course, Wentworth. He drives the ball so well. Got the touch around the greens. Can he hold a few putts? I think he's a strong each way bet this week as the headliner. 5 each way. Ireland Shane Lowry 16-1 to win this big event this week.
Did you also mention Patrick Reed?
Yeah. He was the second pick at 40-1 each way.
Take a bow, John.
32.9% profit now for Virtual Insanity for 2022. So I was down the Curragh.
That's beating inflation, buddy.
Yeah, it's not bad. 46.5% profit last year. Might be able to take this to America now. We might be able to take this to Vegas, folks, for the Vegas sports books, and get everybody in America behind it.
It's funny, there's a hype train that comes behind Virtual Insanity. I think when results are going your way. My brother, we were sitting in Lonigan's pub, Atlantic pub, overlooking the Salt Hill Promenade on Sunday as Lowry won the tournament, and we quickly were getting up your Virtual Insanity tips, and my brother was sitting beside me and he was looking at it going, Jesus, he had Lowry and Patrick Reed. There's a bit of a... People are starting to think you have a crystal ball, John, I think.
Well, the harvest failed at Cheltenham this year. It was like the Wicker Man. I was about to be sacrificed. But we've kind of got over that now, and the golf's gone well. So, look, we'll take it while we have it. But it's a long-term game. I was making a loss, probably about 10-20% loss until about 2 months ago, and I think I've had 3 winners in 5 weeks. So it can turn very quickly.
That is not bad. There was a week off in the middle of that as well.
Yeah, so look, it's just sometimes the harder you try these things, sometimes the worse it gets for you. But if you just relax a bit and just watch as much as you can.
Don't be modest, John. You should have walked in here with a Superman cape on.
Well,
go for it.
You have to be grounded in life. So it's like the bird on the shoulder. Like you can't tell the bird to appear; it just appears and then it flies away sometimes. But at the moment, it's on my shoulder.
The rest of the season, there are tournaments.
Yeah, the PGA Tour starts this week. The new season. Out in California, so we'll be looking at that now today. Fortinet Championship. I really love these kind of events, like this time of year in the new PGA Tour season. Kind of the players can maybe a level below, but like a lot of kind of people coming in from the Corn Ferry Tour. So that's my kind of nerdy study. So no, I'm big into that now. Be about 4 or 5 of those events, and they'll wrap it up.
You weren't a fan, John, of as a lot of people weren't, of Sergio Garcia's actions at the weekend. Taking a place off a younger player who maybe could have gone into the tour and made a little bit of money for themselves.
There's a Twilight Zone is my favourite TV series, and there's a kid in the Twilight Zone. It's quite an iconic thing where he goes, "You're a bad man. You're a very bad man." And I'm sure that Sergio Garcia would attest that he's a good man, and maybe he's a good man. I don't know him personally, or whatever, but his actions have not been admirable. In complete contrast to Shane Lowry. And what I can say for certainty about Sergio Garcia is he's a complete underachiever. He's one of the biggest underachievers in the game. And there's a sense of entitlement there that I don't understand for a game that's given him so much. And I found it really, really disappointing what I saw over the weekend for that. And I was a huge fan of Sergio Garcia. So really, really disappointed to see what's happened the last while. But like all the Greg Norman is the biggest choker golf's ever seen. The Masters choked it in 1996, never won a major in America for all the talent he had. And there's a lot of, I get an air of resentment out of these people in LIV who are taking all the Saudi money. And I just think that there's more to life. You got to handle yourself with a bit of class. And I think that's been lacking in certain aspects of this whole LIV drama.
Yeah, you couldn't find a better collection to take off the tour and shoehorn into a meaningless exhibition series that you don't have to tune into. It's like...
Well, because it was interesting what you said yesterday about Patrick Reed being an interesting character, Ger, because I actually think Patrick Reed did, I think Ian Carter wrote to the BBC, was behaved impeccably, has supported European Tour events in the past. So I'm not too hard on Patrick Reed, but the Sergio thing, I'd love to do, if I had a private jet, I'd love to go around the world and just turn up at these press conferences and go after these guys and just be hammering them with questions every single week, because they deserve to be called out and they deserve to be asked serious questions,
Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, right? Like what we saw at the weekend was a golf tournament played on our time zone that really captured the imagination, because you had some really high-profile golfers going at it. Having a couple of LIV golfers in the mix did help. Having Patrick Reed does help.
Taylor Gooch, yeah.
And so the tour will be lesser for them not being there, and ultimately that's going to dictate the fact that they're going to be allowed to play. Some deal is going to have to be done. Maybe they get dispensation to play 5 or 6 tournaments on the tour or something, and also in the Ryder Cup, and these two things coexist pretty merrily. Maybe that's one outcome that is kind of, there is an intermediate solution that isn't the radical live golf want to take over the entire world and they're going to get there, and it isn't the nightmare scenario for the PGA and the DP and all the other world tours. Like there probably is a money situation in the middle where everybody gets a bit rich out of it and nobody feels particularly happy about it apart from the live golfers.
Yeah, there's a broker. You need a broker for that, and the camps seem very entrenched now. Like Rory has been beating the hell out of everybody around this. Like even the way he said about the Ryder Cup last week. Well, the future of the Ryder Cup is not the guys like Poulter, Westwood, Garcia. It's the Højgaards. It's Robert McIntyre. Yeah. Like you can imagine the frost. It'd be the second ice age if you had Sergio Garcia in a locker room now with the current Ryder Cup players, the European guys.
But on that, I was surprised. Patrick Reed came out. He's obviously going to say this anyway, but he came out after the tournament at the weekend and said, "Oh, I was delighted with the treatment and the way that the guys on the tour, came up to me and approached me." Like, I don't want it to be a case of these guys are saying all these critical things of the live players in interviews and then being all chummy with them behind the scenes. Because I think there needs to be a certain level of cold shoulder here to make them realise what they've done, essentially. I mean, if Reed is quite happy with, he's picking up the pennies at European Tour events, he's getting to still play and get the live money, and yet he's clearly, according to him anyway, getting treated the same as any other player in the tour.
I mean, maybe he was getting treated with the same way he was always treated by people.
Yeah.
It hasn't changed, they don't care about that though.
No.
They don't, like, ultimately, what the golfers care about is like their routine and their money and their world ranking points and their ability to get into tournaments and pick and choose whatever tournaments they play in, which like they're not going to be able to do with live. Live are going to have a certain number of events. You're going to have to show up on those weeks. Like, none of the logical arguments apart from they're doing it for the money makes any sense.
I just remember Sergio Garcia. I was just so happy when he won the Masters, and when he started his career, that shot at Medina in 1999. He's a teenager. He's running after the ball. He won the Irish Open here at Druids Glen. This guy was happy guy, smile on his face. And where did it all go wrong? I just don't know. Anyway, Spurs play tonight.
Yeah.
And better news for you, John.
Antonio Conte didn't have him pegged for a royalist.
No, visited Buckingham Palace, didn't he? So nice of him to do so. Yeah, you never know what people's
I think he was just going as a gawker though, right?
Yeah. Look,
I find it's Richarlison watch now. Anytime I'm watching Spurs, I literally, it's those flawed characters.
It's the tattoo, Shane, as we discussed.
Well, it's this, but like there was a series done. I can't remember if it was Netflix. I think it was called Mavericks, where they kind of honed in on sports people like the likes of Alex Higgins and these people with flawed characters, but also intriguing characters. Like, I always find myself drawn to these people. I'm not saying Richarlison is flawed in any way, but he's different. He's eccentric. The fact that he's not afraid to show his emotion, crying with his family after the match the other night, scoring his first Champions League goals. Like, there's just something about him that's, you just know. Well, the cheekiness to pull off little stunts in matches that other players wouldn't even consider. He's got that. I'm not saying that's a flawed trait. It's actually quite admirable. He's one of those people that is almost Cantona-esque in his aura. I don't know if you agree, John. I know you're a big fan of him.
Well, I think just because he played for Watford and for Everton, people think he's not as good as he maybe is. He's a really, really good player. Like, he's a regular enough player in the Brazilian team. And Romario played for PSV Eindhoven, and was the player of the 1994 World Cup, ended up at Barcelona. So sometimes these players can play for clubs that are, coming from South America that you wouldn't expect them to play for. I really do believe, lads, Brazil are going to win this World Cup. I think Brazil need to win a World Cup. It's 20 years now, and the obsession in Brazil for football. I was in Rio for the final, didn't get in, obviously, I've told that story before, but I remember watching the third place game against the Netherlands, and this was after the period of mourning, given the 7-1 defeat to Germany. There was like 5 or 6 hours of TV that day in Rio of following the team bus for hours for a third place match at the World Cup. The obsession there, and for Anthony, who came from a tough background, or Richarlison, to come from their home country to go to another continent and to make it, it's really admirable, and have a bit of character along the way with that. It's great, but it's probably helpful for him. He's got Emerson Royale and Lucas Moore there, and Conte likes him. So, yeah.
I don't remember what happened in that third, fourth place playoff.
Oh, neither do I, to be honest. I had too many beers, to be honest. But I think I don't even know.
I presume they won, did they? They must have won at home. They would have cared about it in a way that...
I can't remember. Shane, you check it out there on Google.
Richarlison was linked to Manchester United, not very much, but a little bit. We spoke to somebody who kind of was like, there's a weird ownership structure of Richarlison.
It's not one of these Tevez style things, is it?
It's not a million miles away.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the case now. There's a lot of intermediaries who own certain rights to some of these players, and that's why you see them move on much more regularly than you might see or might expect.
Brazil 0, Netherlands 3 in that third place.
Right, okay.
Van Persie, Blinder, when
the complete opposite of what I thought would happen.
Yeah.
Would Manchester United prefer to have Richarlison or Anthony?
Do you know what? In the same way I like Richarlison is also why I like Anthony. Like the straight away, bit of attitude, bit of completely unnecessary flicks of the leg on his debut.
That was funny.
And there was no point to it, but it was still kind of funny. And then the finish for the goal and the fact that he's straight away kissing the badge in celebration. He's going to be one of those cult heroes if he continues doing things like that, I think, at United. So there's just these South American players have a bit of flair, they have a bit of cheekiness and a bit of grit as well. They're not afraid of a tackle. The same way Lisandro Martinez, I think, is going to be a quality signing for United. They just add a different dimension. Like I'm interested, John, when you were over in Brazil, and football is the religion over there, but the same way Maradona is God in Argentina, is it too obvious to say that Pele is the God in Brazil? I know they've had a number of them over the years, but is he the revered figure, or is it a more recent thing where Mario and Ronaldo have been?
Well, I didn't really see Flamengo. I didn't really go around the football. I was only there for a few days, so I didn't really see. I didn't kind of get to the murals of the world, So I think like Brazil, like a lot of Argentina is based around Buenos Aires, isn't it? Like River Plate and Boca, whereas Brazil is a bit more fractured with Sao Paulo and Corinthians, and it's a bit more spread out. Also, I think historically, like Brazil was a military dictatorship, and Pele was keeping his head down under that. So Argentina was in probably a more brutal military dictatorship, but it came out of that. By the time Maradona was winning the '86 World Cup, it was a democracy. When Pele was winning World Cups for Brazil, it was a military dictatorship and didn't become one a democracy until 1985. So I just think there's a little bit of a different vibe around their heroes. And they've had so many heroes. They've had Zico, they've had Socrates, they've had Romario, they've had Ronaldo, they've had Rivaldo, they've had Ronaldinho. They've had so many that maybe Pele,
Didi, Vava,
Garrincha. So he's just one of many. Now the biggest one, but he's just one of many. So therefore, I think Maradona is a singular icon in Argentina.
And until Messi wins the World Cup finally this time, who knows what a proper end that would be.
I think that Messi spent pretty much all of his life in Spain.
That's a fair point. Right, John, thanks very much.
All right, lads.
12 minutes past 9. That is a victory lap for the virtual insanity over the last couple of weeks. It's been in fuego, and you should definitely tune in on Thursday when we bring you this week's OTB AM, brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Here's what's on OTB Sports Radio for you today. OTB Gold is Chris Heron, who played in the NBA while he was a heroin addict. Brilliant interview with him. There's a 30 for 30 about him. Dadcast episode at 3. Career Retrospective is Shay Given at 4. And Joe meets Ruby Walsh on OTB Gold from 6 tonight. And the show is live with Joe Malloy from 7. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And you can also download the OTB Sports app for the very latest sports content and analysis, and the best access to our podcasts as well. We're back after the break with the Republic of Ireland International Stephanie Roche.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Off the ball.
It's been ruled out, Richarlison's goal. This is the pain of VAR. 2-1 now to Fulham, 5 minutes of stoppage time. We're in the 92nd minute at the moment. Shane Duffy, I don't think it's got on.
He got booked as well for taking his jersey off for Richarlison. I mean, the ultimate pain of getting booked for a goal is disallowed because you took your top off. I mean, imagine if that booking cost them later in the season.
Yeah, I can't imagine Lara did that in the 80s, to be honest.
Subscribe now to the OTB Football Podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts, and download the OTB Sports app.
Things that put people off on a first date. Showing up late and getting your name wrong. Always a great start. Looking at their phone more than you? Hello? Someone who only talks about themselves. Oh, really? God, aren't you great? Look, no one said dating is perfect, but at GoDating.ie, we promise we'll always try and find your perfect match. Because somewhere out there, there's someone for you. And GoDating.ie will help you find them. Yes, even you, socks and sandals guy. Go on, go for it with GoDating.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Now, Just Eat are proud partners with UEFA as part of their Champions League sponsorship. Just Eat are set to visit 4 of Ireland's biggest universities on UEFA Champions League match days in September and October, aiming to increase awareness of their UEFA sponsorship. At each campus, they'll be hosting a soccer skills activation, and those who participate have a chance to win Champions League branded prizes, Just Eat vouchers, and one lucky winner per campus will win UEFA Champions League tickets and hospitality. And I'm delighted to say Stephanie Roche is with us this morning to help promote this. Stephanie, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Hey lads, how are you? I'm all good, thank you.
The draw came through last week for Ireland and it punctured a little bit of the joy and celebration around the team, just given the fact that we were hoping for an easy draw and we got a really hard draw. What was your immediate reaction to the news that it's Scotland or Austria, and most likely Austria?
Yeah, definitely. I think when you look at the draw, I think we did get the harder side of it. I think also the fact that we obviously missed round 1 to get into round 2, and we've got an away draw as well. I think that was a little bit unfortunate because I think maybe the team that's qualified to round 2 maybe should have had the home draw, so that kind of goes against you as well. But look, I think the girls have said it. I think they've come through a really tough group. Getting to the playoff spot was a tough thing to do originally, so I don't feel fear any of the teams that are playing. But as you say, we've got definitely the tougher side of the draw, but it's just about facing whoever we get now, whether it be Scotland or Austria. I think, as you said, it probably will end up being Austria. I probably would have preferred Scotland, but look, we'll see what happens in that game, and all we can do is just prepare for it.
Hopefully there's a mass brawl. It goes to extra time and penalties and they're completely exhausted and they've loads of suspensions. That's the best case scenario here for us.
Yeah, definitely. Look, you'll obviously look for everything to possibly go our way, and whatever can happen in that game can definitely, if that can help us. But look, as I said, I think the girls have faced tougher tests over the last couple of games. I think the game against Sweden away particularly was a great result for us. So look, I think we've seen in the past when we're up against it, we're probably at our best. I think we're expected to win games. Probably that's where we don't perform. So I think to play a team like Austria might be a bigger challenge, and it might end up playing into our hands as well.
We were having this conversation a little bit earlier on about the very definition of counter-attacking, and the team has been built for big games. The team isn't necessarily built for dominating games against opponents who are of similar standard to us. But certainly if Austria come and or if we're in Austria and Austria are dominating possession in that game, Ireland won't really be that worried. The setup of the team structurally and tactically is designed to be able to withdraw or to withstand that kind of pressure.
Exactly, yeah. I think that's how we've built the whole campaign, so as we've played throughout the whole campaign so far. I think when you look at the players that we have, you've got pacey players up front like Heather Payne and Leanne Kiernan, who you can bring in and they'll kind of take the pressure off the defence. And as you say, we've been set up in games where we've played our best, where we've been kind of compact defensively and just trying to use that quick counter-attack and get the ball forward quickly for those type of players to be able to produce something. So, look, that might suit us a little bit better. I think in the last 2 games, maybe we got through them and we got the result which we needed, but probably the performance wasn't as good as it has been previously. So, look, that might suit us a bit more, as I said before, kind of, and as you said, the way we set up as a team is probably suited to be kind of a bit more compact defensively and try and hit them on the counter-attack.
If you're to make the argument, Stephanie, for Ireland to progress, regardless of whether it's Scotland or Austria, like, I guess Vera has ensured that these players play against some of the big teams, even in friendlies and that. She's always keen to get some of the top-ranked teams against her side. And then when you look at the Swedish draw as well, I mean, they've done it before against one of the top teams in the world, so there's no reason why they can't take on anyone.
Yeah, exactly. And I think just it's in kind of our Irish DNA, isn't it, in terms of sports? We always seem to perform better when we're the underdog, and I think that's something that we've always had. As you mentioned, we play kind of against some tougher teams in the build-up to this campaign. Obviously, we had a bit of a losing streak, but I think it's stood to us going through this campaign because we've kind of been prepared for the bigger nations coming to us and kind of not just going into games where maybe you might win easily and it gets the confidence up. It's about kind of preparing for tougher games going forward within the campaign. And as I said, that's stood to us so far. So hopefully it can kind of, when we play against either Scotland or Austria, that will stand to us again. But look, it's going to be a tough game. Obviously, getting through that as well. I think it's Switzerland will face Wales or Bosnia, and then kind of, it depends on who gets through the group in terms of the 3 who will go to the mini tournament in February as well. So there's still a long way to go, but we just got to take it game by game and hope that the results go our way.
Our only real reference point for a playoff in the women's game was back in 2008 against Iceland, and I know you were part of that squad at maybe 19 or 20 years of age, very young. But what are your recollections of that? Like, I remember it was a 1-1 game at home, and then the game in the ice and snow over in Iceland ended 3-0. Sadly, not to Ireland, but that must have been quite an experience for you, and something that a lot of these Irish players now are going to have to face themselves. I think there's only 3 members of the current squad that were on that team back then as well. So it's a lot of pressure when you get to that playoff moment.
Yeah, and look, I think looking back on that game, that was my first ever cap for Ireland, and I remember going out on the pitch before the game, and there was groundsmen going around with these big shovels and like hitting the ice, and I was like, this isn't going to go ahead. There's no way. The pitch was completely unplayable, and the game went ahead anyway, and obviously, as you said, we lost the game. But for me, to see us get into a playoff is brilliant, because constantly you hear people talking about how women's football has progressed and the team is doing really well. And for me, we haven't progressed until we at least match what we've done in 2008, and we've done that with this World Cup playoff. But for me, that's the best thing that's happened now, is that we've got to the playoff, we've made that breakthrough, and hopefully, as I said, I know it's a lot harder of it. Obviously, back then it was just a 2-game playoff. It was home and away draw, whereas now for the World Cup, it's a little bit more complicated. But for me, matching that playoff and getting there is definitely progress, and that's great to see. So hopefully, as I said, the girls can go one step further and get us there. But for me, that was the biggest thing that ever happened with women's football, was getting to that playoff. And as I said, over the years, you're constantly told women's football is getting better. It's this, that and the other, and obviously people are getting more interested in it. But for me, the biggest progression for us has to be getting to that playoff, and that's been great to see.
I know, and like the benefits of getting to a tournament in terms of inspiring future generations. So that's the prize. And like, even if we don't qualify this time, you have to hope that the improvement in results is going to lead to a better draw for the Euros, and we should definitely qualify for the Euros given how well the team is playing at the moment and the age profile of the squad. So, you know, you can make the case that it's not going to be a disaster if we don't qualify, but it's going to be so disappointing because we're all so invested in this group at the moment. What's your own situation at the moment, Stephanie? You were obviously back in named in Ireland squads for the 2 matches in the summer. What's your situation at the moment?
Yeah, look, I kind of have been on standby for quite a while now. I've been involved with the home base squad, obviously back playing with Peamount. I've been in and around the squad quite a bit. I was on standby for the Georgia game, and then got drafted in last minute, just before my wedding actually. So it was all a bit hectic, but yeah, look, as I said, I'm on standby with the team. I've had conversations with Vera. I've been around the squad quite a bit, and obviously I've been part of it throughout this campaign. So, look, all I can do is kind of keep focusing on my club performances, and hopefully that'll give me an opportunity to get back in again. But look, I'm always, as I've said, I'm always available to play for Ireland. I always want to play for Ireland. I'm not ready to retire just yet, but as I said, I'm on standby, and I've had conversations with Vera. I've been around the squad a bit, but at the moment I'm kind of just on the outside, as I said.
Nothing else you can do except keep scoring goals like you did at the weekend.
Yeah, that's it. Hopefully I can get a few more of them. I probably should have had a couple more in that game, to be honest, but look, we got the win, and as you said, I got the goal, which was nice.
I did want to ask you about the story that's kind of been brewing over the last 24, 48 hours or so, the Galway situation, where Galway are doing relatively well at the moment in the league. You know, a few wins here and they could be much further up the table. They're nowhere near the worst team in the league by any stretch of the imagination, but they've announced now that they're not going to apply for membership of the league next season, and they've stated that they hope that somebody else will come in and that there will be a senior Galway women's football team. There's a suggestion today that it might be in connection with the fact that the game is going semi-pro, and it'd be a bit of a disaster if going semi-pro was an excuse or a reason for some of these clubs not to progress. What was your take and read and all that, and what have your teammates and friends and colleagues within the league have been saying about it?
Yeah, look, obviously when it was announced, there was a message into our WhatsApp group with Peamount, and a lot of the girls are kind of asking questions about it. And for me, I'll be honest, my initial thought was surely they're going to go in with Galway United. It's just been announced that they're not going to go ahead with it, but they're going to be affiliated with the men's team a little bit better. So, look, I'd be shocked if they do go out of the league, because they've been a great team over the years. I think some of the players that have come through the Galway setup, like the likes of Julianne Russell, Maeve de Burka, Niamh Fahey obviously played there years ago as well. So there's definitely players within that region that are capable of playing within the Women's National League. So to not have a team would be disastrous, you know. And I think, as I said, they've been successful over the years. probably kind of that team that have almost got there but not got there, you know. And when you look at their underage system over the last couple of years, they've won under 17s and under 19s titles, so they definitely have a young good squad coming up. So to not be in the league would, as I said, be disastrous. So hopefully, as I said, my thought straight away was surely Galway United are going to come in and obviously they've gone full time in their men's setup, so surely they can help the women's side and it can become one big club.
Yeah, that would be really great, and it kind of would definitely be a way forward. Like, is it taken as a fact that the league is going semi-professional next year? Is that what your understanding of that is?
I like to hope so. I think the rumours I've heard, obviously nothing's been confirmed yet, but the rumours that I've heard is that a lot of the clubs, obviously we've seen the likes of Bowes coming forward and Shell's kind of affiliating with the men's team a bit more, so it's definitely seems to be heading that way. And look, it's something that I've been calling for the last few years. I think when you look at the players and the standard within the league, it's definitely capable of doing that, and going semi-pro will help improve it, will help improve performances, will give the girls in the league a better chance to be able to perform and focus more on their football and stuff. So I think it's got to be the way forward, and hopefully it will. Yeah, because
that seems to have been the reason that the on OTB FM the chairperson was saying that was one of the reasons why they couldn't continue next year. Now, hopefully it is a way of getting the Galway United's ownership to go, actually, you know, yeah, we should actually be a men's and women's club. It makes perfect sense. It's like doubling our audience, all the games that we'll play, the youth system and the rising tide will lift all boats. So fingers crossed, because that seems to be the first time anybody's publicly said that's what's going to happen next year. You're saying that it's long been rumoured, so maybe that's the start of the official word leaking out?
Yeah, hopefully. As I said, I think it's something that myself and a few other players in the league have been saying. And look, I know it's easy to say it, but there's ways of how you do it and how you make it happen, and that's up to the people that run the league. But for me, I think it's the way forward. I think particularly when you see the women's Irish team doing so well, you have the Euros on TV. A lot of people are more interested in women's football. So for me, the only way forward is to go semi-professional. So please God it happens, and look, we'll wait and see.
It's far too early to be asking you this question, Stephanie, but I'm going to ask you it anyway. Like, I saw on your Twitter at the weekend, you were at the FAI headquarters, and a lot of you were standing on the sidelines as a lot of young girls were taking part in a bit of a training camp over the weekend. There was a photo of you standing on the sideline, arms crossed. You had very managerial vibes off, you have to say. Like, is that down the line something that you're half thinking about? Is it more punditry, or would management and coaching be something half interesting for you?
Definitely. Like, yeah, I obviously do quite a bit of coaching at the moment. I have my own coaching club, and I'd be in schools and running summer camps and stuff like that. So definitely something I'd be interested in. Like, obviously football's been a huge part of my life, and I think if I was just walk away and not be involved in football at all, I don't think I'd be a very good person to be around. So it's definitely something that I'd love to get into. I love that side of the game. And actually, you mentioned the thing I done with Sky. Like, some of the young girls that were playing there were excellent, and definitely, I think, stars for the future. So look, to be able to be a part of something like that would be nice. As you say, a little bit further down the line, obviously, but that's definitely something I'd like to get into, would be a bit of coaching. I'm doing my UAFB at the moment, so hoping to keep going down that the coaching badge route and see what happens in the future. I know you're a big Manchester United fan, Stephanie, and very jealous looking at you during the week at the Irish Grocers Benevolent Fund charity dinner. A lot of big names there, Bernard Brogan, and I know Ken Doherty was there as well. But Roy Keane, I mean, to be sitting at a table with the likes of Roy Keane, I'm sure there were conversations off mic that were more than interesting to be at that table. Yeah, it was a crazy day. Like, obviously, as you say, I'm a big United fan, and I'd been asked to do the event a long time ago, and I only got an email about the kind of run through, and I seen Roy Keane's name, and I was just like, Jesus Christ, Roy Keane is doing this. So it was all, obviously, as you can imagine, as a United fan, I'd be a huge fan of Roy Keane, so to know I was going to be sitting at a lunch table with him was pretty special. But it was a great day, obviously, and as you say, we done the Q&A and stuff up on stage, but before that we were at the table sitting down chatting and just hearing some of the stories. And obviously, as I said, I would have grown up watching Roy Keane on telly and hearing some of his stories, and also Ken Doherty, like, who's a legend as well. So it was nice to be able to kind of sit down with the two of them and have chats. And we actually ended up, it was meant to finish at 4:00 and we didn't get out of there until about 6:20. So the conversation went on afterwards as well, which was nice. And look, it was a great day. And as I said, as a United fan, to be in the company of someone like that was fantastic. Did you get to chat to Roy much one-on-one? Yeah, he was actually lovely, you know, and obviously he has this persona and people kind of don't really know what way to take him or whatever. But for me, he was lovely. He was really chatty, and we just chatted about football. He was asking about the women's team and obviously where I'm playing at the moment, all that sort of stuff. So he was really, really nice guy. And as I said, it can be hard when you hear the stories about him. And obviously I've known a lot about him throughout the years, but obviously being face to face and having that chat was nice. And as I said, he was a lovely guy, really nice.
We've been talking all morning and probably all week, Stephanie, about the postponements in games for obvious reasons cross channel, and it was similar for the Women's Super League. Like it was all set for this big, record-breaking, massive attendance kickstart to the new season at the weekend in the men's stadiums as well, which was going to add a little bit of an extra dimension to the whole season. Now that that's not happened, disappointing looking in from the outside. Like, it probably wouldn't be the same. These games probably have to be rescheduled for midweek if they are to be in those stadiums, which might not draw as big a crowd. The families can't really go in the evening kickoffs and all the rest. So a bit disappointing from that perspective.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, look, obviously people are talking about how it's disruptive for the men's game because obviously there's such a big schedule at the moment before the World Cup. But for me, it's a bigger effect on the women's game because obviously, as you said, after the Euros, the promotion around the games, the first games of WSL have been huge. They're playing in the men's stadium. And look, there's been a lot of work that's gone into it. But to change the schedule like that has really messed up a lot of stuff for the women's teams. And obviously, as you say, the games will now have to probably go ahead midweek, which maybe might not draw as many people in. So, look, hopefully something can be arranged and the girls will be able to play in the men's stadium because I think, as I said, with the kind of interest around the women's game after the Euros, they definitely will draw the crowd. And it would be disappointing to see that not happen there, but it's, for me, as I said, I think the men's game has been effective, but for me it's been more so effective for the women's.
Stephanie, great to have you with us this morning. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Thanks a million, guys.
That's Stephanie Roche there. Just Eat Proud partners with UEFA as part of their Champions League sponsorship. They're set to visit 4 of Ireland's biggest universities on UEFA Champions League match days in September and October, aiming to increase awareness of their UEFA sponsorship. Now, tomorrow we have Mark Lawrenson, obviously playing Ajax tonight. Liverpool, that is, not Mark Lawrenson. We'll have the latest episode of You Had to Be There and much more as well. We're going to play out with some tennis. I do want to tell you one last time about our Braeburn Coffee, which is the official coffee partner of Off the Ball. Each week we're giving one lucky winner a €100 voucher to spend on some Braeburn coffee goodness at an Applegreen store near you. To enter, check out @OffTheBall on Twitter, like and retweet our Braeburn competition post, and you'll be in the draw. Braeburn Coffee never compromises on quality or taste to give you the best on-the-go experience on the road. Available at Applegreen stores today. So yeah, here is some Caitlin Thompson of Racket Magazine talking about the latest superstar in tennis. This one's the real deal. It's Carlos Alcaraz. Enjoy.
So, have we entered the Carlos Alcaraz era in men's tennis? That is one of the questions after last night's win at Flushing Meadows. He is now the youngest men's world number 1 in history. He's the youngest Grand Slam winner since Nadal won back in 2005 when he was also aged 19. Nadal in 05. Capacity crowd of 23,000 on their feet inside the Arthur Ashe Stadium last night. An array of shot making on display from Alcaraz. And he did, of course, beat Casper Ruud from Norway in 5 sets. Ruud, 23 years of age, the number 5 seed. So Alcaraz won the 5th, 6-3. Caitlin Thompson of Racket Magazine is with us. So the Alcaraz era, this is when we'll say it began. How glorious it's going to be is going to be the interesting question. What have we got on our hands here?
Generational talent is the easy way to describe it. There's a lot of exciting young players coming up on the men's side that we have gotten a chance to take a closer look at over the past 2 weeks. But Carlos Alcaraz has been somebody who most of us in tennis have had our eyes on for quite a while. And this, if his skill set and mentality is anything to be believed based on what we saw, going to be the first of many, many, many Grand Slam championships.
So, world number 1, he's won 6 ATP events to his name. This is, I guess, his big, massive breakthrough. Emotional scenes, he scored an ace, dropped to the ground, very much in tears. Only 19, of course, but what kind of personality is he?
As far as I can tell, he seems pretty simple in a way that is sort of maybe endearing. I think he's somebody who has a lot of like eat, sleep, tennis kind of mentality as opposed to a, like a Federer type who speaks 4 or 5 different kinds of languages and is a little bit more of a James Bond kind of character. I think this guy is like born and raised on the clay courts of Spain and wants to play tennis all day long. I think the fact that he made his matches this past week especially, thinking especially about that Tiafoe match coming into the final before the semis on Friday. He made those a lot longer than they needed to be. And I can say a lot about that based on why I think that is, or how tactically that happened. But part of me thinks that actually kind of is part of his personality, which is just he loves to play so much. He's not looking for a ruthless machine-like ending to tennis. I think he's basically a giant kid who has a joyousness in his play that is really, really fun to watch. He's also skill set wise so exciting, just because he has a lot of the tools and a lot of the game that his 19 years would sort of indicate that he wouldn't be ready to have sort of mature and ready to deploy. But yeah, personality wise, I think he's kind of just like a see tennis ball, hit tennis ball kind of guy. I'm not sure he's reading Nietzsche on the sidelines.
Further to your point about time on the court, just shy of 24 hours of tennis across the US Opens. That's the most minutes on court in Grand Slam history. So durability, not an issue for him. And on his game itself, so I noticed, he had 55 winners to Ruud's 37 and threw in plenty of unforced errors as well. I was reading across the last 18 months, this incredible rise from 141st in the world to number 1 in the world. You know, his shots will often make an appearance on ESPN Sports Centre in their top 10 plays of the day, where they go through, you know, the best of sport across the board, and he'll pop up there. So if you want to see dramatic shot making, then Alcaraz is your guy as well.
Yeah, he's really fun in the way that it's so tempting, especially for the commentators we have here, who tend to be the same boring, mostly dudes who've been commentating on tennis for the last 30 years. I think over the fortnight I heard Cliff Drysdale, who's got to be 180 years old, and still refers to the women players as girls. These people have been used to talking about, especially on the men's side, because they don't really let women commentate on men's tennis here for some reason, about how the comparisons to the big three are inevitable, right? Like, if you've spent the last 20 years really talking about 3 names on the tennis tour, even if it's not the match you're commentating, the specter of them is looming large in the slam, then I think it can be kind of derivative. And I want to be careful not to be derivative to Carlos Alcaraz, Carlitos, as he likes to be called, because I think the comparison is not exactly accurate. That said, there's elements of this greatness that we've watched, some of the improvisation and shot making and creation that people really like in Federer's game, where he's not bound to patterns. He's capable of throwing in a trick shot, a dupe shot, something that looks unbelievably gracefully athletic. He also has this determinism and sort of battle fatigueness of Nadal. Plus, he combines a lot of the durability and flexibility and ability to turn defense into offense that Djokovic has. But really what I like the most about him is he's joyous and he's creative. And I think that has a little bit to do with why he made a few of those matches in the fortnight a little bit closer than they needed to be. A more disciplined player, or Casper Ruud, for example, would have had possibly fewer opportunities because of his tennis, but would have seized the opportunities more. But Carlos Alcaraz is coming to the game, it appears, and those of us who've been watching him now for about 18 months, as you said, as he's sort of rocketed up through the rankings, what we like about him is obviously the things that are very, very visible for anybody to see. He's fast. He's creating shots that you don't think are geometrically possible. He's dogged and fights and gets inspired. But he's also creates such an incredible amount of pace without much effort, and he seems to be having a lot of fun doing it. I talk a lot about how on the women's side it's been really fun for the most part to watch the women, the new champions, the new faces we have, a lot of times embrace joy and smiling. And I think that that's no small thing, especially when you've on the men's side been confronted with 20 years of like very serious business. Sport is fun to me, and Carlitos Alcaraz, above all the amazing things that you can say about him, for me is probably most exciting because he's really fun to watch and he is having fun playing, and that really telegraphs.
His rise from 141st in the world, where he was hanging around in January of 21, to now number 1, that sounds utterly extraordinary. And he replaces Leighton Hewitt, who managed to do it at the age of 20 in 01. I guess at the same time, there's a lot of mitigation there. There's the decline of the big three. And then there's Djokovic, I think missed out on 6,000 points this year given his vaccine situation, and Medvedev wasn't at Wimbledon as well. So certain things have conspired here to, I guess, allow Alcaraz go all the way to number one. But nonetheless, that is as dramatic as it gets, isn't it? 18 months from 150th out in the world to this. This is insane.
Absolutely. And those are real results. That isn't fluky. Totally agreed with you in terms of some opportunities that presented themselves, both because of Wimbledon's unilateral decision not to award points to to anybody because of the kerfuffle over the ban on Russian and Belarusian athletes. Djokovic's self-own, where he just kind of refuses to follow the rules, whereas everybody else has, is, we've talked about ad nauseum. But more than anything else, Carlitos Alcaraz has beaten all of them. And he's beaten all of them pretty emphatically. He beat Djokovic emphatically earlier this year. He beat Rafa. This is really a changing of the guard in a way that we've seen generations of talent come up after the big three. There was that famous lost generation, Delpo because of injuries, Tsonga getting to a few finals, then kind of fading into obscurity. You can look at your Monfils's team is a little bit part of that. He snuck in a Grand Slam based on injury. It's hard to imagine him getting back up into the later stages of slams soon. Zverev team and Zverev and thinking about how this Tsitsipas is not getting any younger, but all of a sudden those guys are, I would think, looking over their shoulder and thinking, oh no, Carlos has arrived before we did. He got the slam before any of us did, team accepted. And I think this feels to me very, very much like a different sort of beast. This isn't just a generation or two of talent coming up after the big three and challenging and pushing them and taking advantage when they feel a little long in the tooth, or, in Djokovic's case, maybe, due to defaulting or vaccine, don't get to play. This feels like this guy is the future. He's the future of tennis. And I think watching him play, I got to see him first in person at the 2021 Indian Wells tournament that had been postponed. So he was probably in the top 100 at that point, but not where he is now. And just being blown away by how scary good he was. We watched him play a few points and just the acceleration, both in terms of his body, but also his racket head, the way he could create pace. I don't want to get too technical because I feel like sometimes you can lose people if you do that, but just the way he plays the game, the way he sees the court, the way he moves around it, and the way he can create from a lot of different places. When you're seeing highlights, that's what you're seeing the result of. And if you watch him do it, that is so many levels above what the average elite athlete is really able to conjure. And I think that's the reason that so many of us, even those of us who really liked Casper Ruud and loved his journey and are really excited, myself included, to see him back in another final after making a go of it at Roland Garros before falling in straights to Rafa. Carlitos is a different beast. He's a different kind of player. He might get his challenger the way that the big three pushed themselves, and Federer just happened to be kind of the first to arrive on the scene. He might get that sooner rather than later, but right now he is levels above pretty much everybody else in the world. And so this number one, doesn't feel like it has an asterisk next to it for all of us who watch the sport.
Okay, that's really interesting, and that's very important for men's tennis, and I guess by extension in the post-Serena world, which we'll come on to in a second, in the women's tennis, because there was I suspect there was probably the great fear and the assumption that somebody had to come just because of Father Time and dominate after the big three, and there would just be this constant sense of, well, he's not in their league at all, and just he's lucky he came after them, and that would be just not a great feel for the sport for 5-10 years.
Agreed. And I think very similarly to when we've had sort of a dearth, there's a story that I like to talk about because to me it's one of the saddest stories in tennis, and it's a real story of missed opportunity. But after the fading of Pete Sampras, obviously Michael Chang, Jim Courier, a lot of these folks were already off the stage. Agassi was one of the last to retire in the early 2000s. Men's tennis was in real conflict. There was Murat Safin, there was Leighton Hewitt, as you mentioned. There were a few names that really could, make Grand Slam finals, Pat Rafter, but it didn't feel like there was an Agassi or a Sampras or somebody really, really, exceptional. And at the time, there were both Williams sisters ascendant, Jennifer Capriati, Kim Clijsters, Maria Sharapova was not yet even on the scene. Justine Henna. This was just a absolute murderer's row. Steffi Graf had just left the scene, but an absolute murderer's row, late 90s, early 2000s for women's tennis. Just absolutely amazing depth. And it was at that time that the WTA and the ATP sat down and tried to negotiate and have a joint tour, something that would have been absolutely miraculous and something that should have happened. The ATP walked away because they didn't want to share money with the women, and their gamble paid off 2 years later when Roger Federer came on the scene, and obviously it was followed by Rafa and Novak to sort of complete that trifecta. But it was to me, that's a sad story because it means the sport could have been creating parity and interconnectedness way earlier. And I think that thought about what happens when your big headliners step aside is a frequent one that the sport really wrings its hands over. And I think I don't tend to ascribe too much of it because I'm somebody who doesn't love attaching the game's successes or failures to a limited amount of stars. I think the game is so much more varied and interesting than that. It's more to me about the traveling circus of, rogues that show up every week in some new locale and battle it out to the death. But for people who really like a star, there is very much that fear when the big three step aside. There is, and let me be clear about this, absolutely no doubt that Carlos Alcaraz can be as good as any one of them. And there is absolutely no doubt that he has the skills and the potential domination on multiple surfaces to do it pretty fast. And I think that's the level of generational talent that he possesses. And my hope for tennis is that there's enough variety around him and cast of characters that's compelling. And I think there is. And obviously at Racket, it's our job to highlight them to make sure that stays interesting. Otherwise, this could get very one-dimensional very quickly because that's how good and much better, I would say, Carlitos Alcaraz, our new number one, is.
Wow. That is amazing, really. Because actually, I do take your point on the stars, but for instance, golf is just mourning the loss of Tiger Woods and they just can't replace him. Nobody can capture the imagination like him, and it is just a vacuum, and that's a tricky place to be. You mentioned he does something technical which can be hard to explain, I appreciate verbally, but let's not dumb down here totally. For the aficionados out there, give us one answer on what Alcaraz does that's a little bit special technically, or how he gets his speed.
A lot of players on the men's tour think about the way that Nick Kyrgios, for example, hits his serve or his forehand, can end up creating overwhelming power and speed. They can really take a huge cut at the ball and it becomes unplayable for their opponent. That's something a lot of elite men can do. And I use Nick Kyrgios as the example because it's so obvious when he's doing it. He takes a massive backswing and just absolutely clobbers the ball that comes at him. That's table stakes for elite men, but it's fun to watch. Carlos Alcaraz can do that without any hesitation on both sides, pretty much from anywhere in the court. To me, the closest way to explain it to another sort of readily available similarity is watching, the 1-inch punch from Bruce Lee. If you're watching a martial arts fight, anybody can take a giant swing and clobber their opponent. Bruce Lee could do almost no take back in almost no amount of time and create deadly force really quickly with absolutely no fanfare. And that's what Carlos Alcaraz can do. And it's really cool and exciting because I don't think I've ever seen it outside of Enter the Dragon really on a tennis court. And when you watch it, it's unbelievably cool to see. And it's very obvious because nobody else can do it.
Okay, sold. You should be in marketing as well. I mean, Bruce Lee in there. I mean, come on. That was sold. So Alcaraz, that's very exciting for the men's. As for the women's side of the draw, week one was all about Serena, which we've talked about ad nauseum at this stage. But I guess the interesting thing here, and maybe this is a parallel to Alcaraz, the world number one, Iga Swiatek, beat the number two, Jabeur, in straight sets. So the thing about Swiatek, she's 21 years of age. She has been the standout player on the WTA tour this season. At one stage, she had a 37-match unbeaten streak, which was absurd. And this is now the third Grand Slam of her career. So she blitzed a French Open memorably in the COVID year, 2020. Another French Open this year. Now US Open. She was in an Australian semi-final this year as well. Are we starting to see, all this a turmoil of sorts and inconsistency at the very top of the women's game? Are we starting to see the 21-year-old now taking ownership?
I hope not because I have anything against Iga. The way she constructs points and her, incredibly consistent ability to generate good or at least good enough tennis to get the better of her opponents is really, really spectacular to sort of get your mind around. But I also think that part of it is she has so much more mental fortitude than the other women on the tour. I think that there are a lot of matches that she can lose by being hit off the court if only the opponent on the other side of the net kept it together. And I'm specifically thinking of the last two matches that she played. Obviously, Aryna Sabalenka, one of the biggest hitters in the game. Somebody I absolutely love. She's kind of a maniac. She's just absolutely fearless. She's like a better Ostapenko because she'll go for the lines and go for pretty much any shot from any position, regardless of her ability to make it. And I love that fearlessness sort of pervades her game. She was up pretty sizably in the third set against Iga in the semis, and I think that was very, very much her match to win. I also think Ons Jabeur, who has all the tools, all the variety, a very, very dynamic, compelling game, much like she did at Wimbledon, just kind of didn't bring her A game, didn't bring her real ability to compete really until the very end of the second set. And if you give a set and a half away at the elite level, especially to somebody who's mentally strong as Iga, game over. You can't really crawl back from that deficit. And so I think, not to take anything away from Iga Świątek, who, as you noted, had a monster win streak, won both of her other Grand Slams at the French Open very emphatically, obviously deserves all of her success. She's got a whole game. I watched her play at the Roland Garros 2018 Junior Girls Championship, where she, I think, ended up in the final against Coco Gauff. She's just been a very, very, very talented young woman for a very long time and has put the whole pieces together. I think for me, one of the things that I love about the World Women's Tennis Association generally is that there has been a lot of variety for a long time. And I think if you look at some of the other contenders in that draw, thinking about Ayla Tomlanovich's steely-eyed win against Serena, and she won that match. Serena threw the kitchen sink at her as such as she was able at these late years in terms of her movement and her ability to contend points. And Ayla didn't flinch. You look at somebody like Annette Kontaveit, who lost to Serena, but who was the second seed in the tournament and just absolutely great in terms of ball striking and movement. There's so many amazing women in the tour. Maria Sakkari, who kind of just hasn't showed up to majors, but is a force on and off it, and frankly should have had two majors last year between the U.S. Open and the French. She had match points, I think, on the ultimate winner, Barbara Krejcikova, at Roland Garros last year. There's just so many women who can really get it done. So I think Iga, to me, is a little bit of an escape artist, plus somebody who's just won based on mental fortitude. Louisa Thomas, who racket readers will recognize as one of our contributors, writes about tennis for the New Yorker. And she did a really powerful, great, thoughtful recap of the women's final that came out a few days ago, and basically gave credit and talked about how the mental part of the game for these women is oftentimes more difficult to master than the physical. And I think if you look at the result, that is the lens through which I watch it. And that, to me, explains a lot of Iga's success. The game is big enough, and she can generate pace enough, and she has enough variety and enough tools. And I'm really not trying to shortchange her, but I think what she does better than everybody else, which is a skill that they can and should all be working on making better, is that mental side of the game. And I think that at this stage where the WTA is filled with a lot of younger players who haven't quite gotten used to the Klieg lights and the excitement in the later stages of tournaments, she's basically been the first to adapt. And there's a lot of room for everybody else to catch up with her.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. So she's more than the sum of her parts in some respects because of that mentality. Is she the sea biscuit to the Bruce Lee analogy? I mean, what are we billing her as?
I mean, I know very little about horses because I'm scared of them, but if you say that, I will agree with it.
So 3 is impressive nonetheless. Is it Kerber? Was that the last female player to win 2 in one season, 2 Grand Slams? That's, 6 years ago, I think, is what I read.
Didn't Osaka win an Australian and a US in the same year, or were hers fragmented between years? You might know
I feel fragmented. I read Kerber, so I suspect fragmented. But I guess Osaka did win in that close period. We can give her pretty close to 2 in a 12-month span anyway.
I think based on her continuous and consistent ability to compete and deliver, despite being at a young age, I don't see anything stopping Iga. I think Naomi has stopped herself, basically. And I think Angelique Kerber, who's awesome and fun to watch and has a very unorthodox game, both based in the way that she directs traffic from the left hand and also gets really low when she hits ground strokes and creates angles that you kind of don't think are possible. She's really cool to watch. She announced she was pregnant before the tournament, and we know from a couple of other examples now that that's not a given that women can come back successfully. Victoria Azarenka has had a couple of really notable results in the last couple of years. So I definitely feel like Iga there are going to be very few barriers for her to dominate. And I think the women's tour has enough variety, talent, and different game styles where it's certainly possible. And like I said, I think on paper, Ons Jabeur has a better game than Iga, and I think on paper, Aryna Sabalenka has a better game than Iga, and that's just the last 2 people she played in the tournament. And again, that's not to take anything away from her, but I do think her edge is mental, and I think if the rest of the field got their minds right, she would have a real fight on her hands.
Yeah, no, I don't think it takes anything away from her. I think, on the contrary, it's an amazing thing to be able to do. So, as a final thought, then, who amongst all the female players at the moment, leaving mentality and all these other variables aside, who has the most talent, rather? Who is the most talented female player? The game when it's on that is the best, in your opinion?
One thing I was so happy to see, having watched women's tennis forever and understood some of the storylines, there are 2 that I want to call out, and they happen to be the 2 women who didn't make it out of the make it out of the later stages of the game, but we're right there. One of whom is Caroline Garcia. She, in terms of athletic ability, complete game, and unbelievable movement, and sort of a disarmingly simple looking game that involves putting herself in perfect position every time she hits the ball. Kind of like what people feel like when they watch Roger Federer. It just looks like it's easy for him. And it's because he's positioned perfectly every time he hits the whatever shot he's hitting. Caroline Garcia possesses that level of talent. And so far it's only really manifested itself in doubles where she has a couple of Grand Slams. Watching her be able to put it together late this summer was really exciting. Getting to see her play up close after she had won Cincinnati, which is obviously a giant tournament coming into the US Open. She kind of got nervous and freaked out when she played her semifinal, which is too bad and speaks to what I was talking about in terms of the mental game. But in terms of talent, she has everything and honestly has for a long time. And so I hope her success continues because it's really, really fun to watch her style of tennis, taking it early, attacking, moving forward, being able to have exquisite net game that I personally really like. So Garcia is somebody who I would look at to say, I hope backs up because talent-wise, she should be there. The other one is Coco Gauff, who's had, a lot of fanfare, deserved, based on her youth and her ability to kind of achieve milestones very young. I don't love a prodigy story. I think that a lot of times it limits our imagination in terms of what people can do, and it overemphasizes the results as opposed to the process. And the reason I bring that up is because Coco Gauff has been so fun to watch, especially in the last year and a half. Obviously, she got to the French Open finals. Obviously, she's been getting to later and later stages in the tournament. And the reason I think this is happening is because she's incredibly talented as an athlete, but most importantly, because she's made changes to her game and she's continued to develop her game. Her forehand is eons better working with a new coach this year than it has been in the past couple of years since I started watching her. And her serve is a lot better. So it really is, sometimes for me, it comes down to how relatable are some of these things. Obviously, the way that these people move and hit the ball and have consistency is even for me, who was a pretty good junior and collegiate player, outside the realm of possibility. But what I can relate to is having a bad forehand and fixing it and getting it to be better. And what I can relate to is getting to a giant final and freaking out and not being able to play your game. And then somehow, in the case of Iga, being able to stay calm and put it together. I don't quite relate to that yet, but I'm trying. And so for me, watching the Cocos and the Caros this tournament has been really fun because I'm watching them slowly put it together year after year, week after week, sometimes day after day. And I think that to me is what's so cool about tennis is you can always get better. And something as a 42-year-old who's 20 years past my prime, almost exactly, I like to think that with sort of continuous effort, you're either getting better or you're getting worse, right? And so there's something really nice about the idea that the talent is still there and the ability to improve is something that everybody does. They just do it a lot better.
OTB.
If your business relies on a van, that wouldn't sound good. But this does. Get up to 75% off van insurance. Now available in FBD brand.